Thank you. Welcome to the April 20th, 2023 meeting of the City of Highland Park Zoning Board of Appeals. Carl, may we get a roll call?
Yes, thank you. Member Trushansky? Here. Member Beck? Here. Yablon?
Here.
Zaransky?
Here.
Hendrick?
Here.
Vice Chair Bay?
Here.
Chair Collether?
Here.
All members are present. There is a quorum this evening, Chair, that I'll also just identify the student representative is here. What's your name again, sir?
Davis, Richard Waters.
Okay. And also I'll identify the council liaison is here as well. And then I am Senior Planner Carl Burhop, the Community Development Department.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from March 16th, 2023. My colleagues had an opportunity to review them.
Were those in the packet? I can't remember.
No, so we will pass that item. The publication date for new business was April 5th, 2023. Is there any business from the public other than the items that are already on the agenda for this evening? And Carl, do we want to make a note about the Glencoe Avenue?
Yes. Would you like me to say something?
Yes, please.
Okay, so there were notices that went out for this date for the address 1248 Glencoe Avenue. If you are here for that application will not be on the agenda. It was resolved by the City Council on April 10th. It won't move forward. It was neither approved, well, essentially, I guess it was just not referred to the Zoning Board of Appeals. If anyone has questions on that, if you're here for 1248 Glencoe, that will not be on the agenda tonight. It will not be discussed. You should reach out to me. I will actually be gone Friday and Monday, but you should reach out to me on Tuesday, and I would be happy to discuss it further with you. My name is Carl Burhop. I'm with the Community Development Department.
Thank you. There was no old business, and that brings us to the first piece of new business this evening, which is 2023-VAR-005, the property at 239 Park Avenue. The applicant is Jan Ann Dubin. Carl, we're ready for your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Carl Burhop. I'm a senior planner with the Community Development Department. This application is for 239 Park Avenue. It's kind of towards the central or east part of the city. It's east of the downtown area, not far from Lake Michigan. It's I've been in this area multiple times through my years here at the city, and this is kind of its own little neighborhood. Obviously, I let the applicant neighbors speak about their area more than me, but it's kind of its own little neighborhood with 4 homes on this subdivision. There was a copy of the subdivision included in the packet. I can't remember when it was approved. Sometime around World War II. It was in the packet. And so again, there's like 4 lots and 4 homes that just kind of have their own little neighborhood off of this Park Avenue. So the applicant is I hope I pronounced this correctly, Waxing Moon Jupi Descendant Trust. I did not pronounce it correctly. Oh, I hope I did. Thank you. So the proposal is for an attached garage. This is in the R5 zoning district. The property does meet the minimum lot area. It exceeds the 12,000 square feet. The existing home was built in 1954, according to the county assessor data. There are 2 elements of relief before the board. Encroachment within the side yard along the north side and encroachment along with the required front yard along the east side. So this is an aerial of the property. Again, there's like 4 lots there that are on this, according to the code, it's a street, and I'll get into that. Well, actually, is that on this slide? Well, I'll go through my bullet points there, though. So this lot is, by zoning code definition, a corner lot. So it has frontage along the south, along Park Avenue, and frontage along the east, which is kind of a no-name private ingress and egress access easement. If you look at the definitions in the code in section 150.202, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm paraphrasing, but street can essentially be any dedicated right-of-way or a private easement for ingress and egress, and this does exceed the width for an alleyway, so it is considered a street. So this is a corner lot. I also know that's consistent with the property immediately to the east, which received a variation back, I believe, in 2017, and I had those notes in my report. So there's 2 front yards, and then there's no technical zoning rear yard for this property. Functionally, you can look at it, you would consider the west property line, which would be the left on the exhibit, would be functionally a rear yard, but in terms of the zoning code, because this is a corner lot, if you look at various definitions, instead it's a side yard along the west and a side yard along the north. This is the survey compared to the site plan, and one thing I want to point out here is that in situations, I should be careful using the word normal, but most of the time properties, call them regular, call them normal, they don't have the street as a private easement on the property. There's dedicated right-of-way. And so the property lines are where you measure all the setbacks from. In this case, that's not the case. In this case, you measure the front yard from the easement line, so that dashed line, that's where you actually measure the 40-foot required front yard setback. And again, that comes from definitions in the code. I think that's the definition for street line in the code, section 150.202. And so then the applicant's design professional drew a buildable area on here, which I then highlighted in red. And so on the left, you can see in brown, there's an existing carport with some type of storage structure behind it. And then the blue shade on the right, that's the proposed garage. It's attached, actually. I didn't color it in, but I did color it in, I think. Here I did. So it's attached essentially by like a breezeway or roof. So the proposals for this garage, it's approximately 21 feet by 21 and a half feet in area. Then with that storage area on the back, though, you'll see that the storage area actually is within the setback requirement. We don't use the pointer anymore. So the area of relief, what's before the board? What is the board considering? The board is considering this corner here, that's within the side yard, and then the board is considering this area here, which is in the front yard. So that's what the board is considering, with the maximum encroachment of, maximum encroachment of 4.9 feet for this in the side yard, and a maximum encroachment of 14 feet for this area within the front yard. Existing nonconformities, I didn't mark this one up, but I'll just indicate to the board that the frame structure is partially nonconforming. There's an existing proposed setback of 7.65 feet, so it's partially nonconforming. And then also the house and the carport is currently partially nonconforming with respect to that 40-foot setback. There's no dimension on this survey for the setback here, so I just tried to eyeball it down here with these dimension setbacks, and so that's why I used the word approximately here, because it's going to be approximate that. This is a floor plan. Again, the proposed storage area and a portion of the garage are within the buildable area, but then obviously the greater portion is not. Elevation plan, this is the north elevation, so this is presumably what the neighbor to the north would see looking south. This is the elevation plan of the east facing the private street, so this is presumably what the neighbor to the east would see looking west. And this is a photo the applicant submitted of the existing condition. There were additional photos in the packet. Obviously, I don't put everything in the packet in my report or in the presentation, but I can pull them up if needed for the applicant's presentation or if the board has questions. Forestry had no objections. They did include comments in the report as a FYI to the board and applicant about the footing foundation using piers and requirement of a tree preservation plan for permit if approved by the ZBA. Again, I'll just point out to the board, so when I discuss this with the forester, I always tell the forester, if you have the permitting authority for this, and this is just an FYI to the board, but I always say to the forester, if you don't have the authority for something and you need a condition that needs to be tied to the standards of approval, then we really need to flag that for the board as something that, hey, the forester is indicating this is something that should be a condition. Forester did not do that for this. They have no objections. They're not flagging anything as an extra condition. These are just FYI comments. Engineering Division had no comments. There were public comment in the packet submitted by the neighbor to the north, Todd Rosenthal. That was in the packet. And there was one post-packet item submitted by the applicant, which I forwarded to Todd Rosenthal, and I also forwarded to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I did not have the opportunity to repost the packet, but I have printed it off here. Is anybody here for this meeting who did not see what the applicant submitted today? I'm happy to give them out. Is anybody here for this? I'm happy to give it out. Is anyone here who did not see these, who wants to look at it? Raise your hand. Anybody? No, okay. Well, if anybody changes their mind, because the zoning board saw this, and therefore these are available for public inspection, I'll just briefly describe what it is. It's an excerpt from the Highland Park Central East and Central Avenue Deerfield Road Survey Update. 6 or 7 or 8 pages here. If anybody wants to see it, they are here. I would encourage anyone to come and view it, because...
Carol, can I have one?
Yes. There you go, sir.
Thanks.
That's the presentation.
Thank you. Member Yablon.
Carl, can I ask you a question about the slide that shows the red line?
Unfortunately, I'm unable to perform that task.
I was asking Carl.
Do you have to repeat that for the
She's
Sorry.
no, she's named Sears Carl.
For the side yard, that one, for the side yard relief, does that red line keep coming towards the alley street?
So the side yard,
Or is the side yard only that little area right there that we're discussing?
the side yard is just this portion here. The front yard, actually, I should have drawn one more line on here, but it wasn't relevant to the case. But I should have actually extended this line straight back too. So this is the front yard here. And then the rear yard is opposite that, or excuse me, this does not have a rear yard. It says 2 required side yards. Oh, so actually these don't have to, actually I drew it correctly. So this is the required front yard entirely to the right of this line. And then this is the side yard here. And so the portion in the side yard is only this. I know technically this kind of like also pokes out, but this is technically a rear yard this is technically a front yard encroachment right here. And only this box here is the side yard encroachment.
What makes it technically a front yard encroachment?
Because when.
Oh, I see, because this, I see it. Answer my own question. I see
Okay,
your line.
thanks. The required yards do not overlap each other. They're exclusive of each other. So the front yard is always drawn first, and that's an area. Then the rear yard is always drawn second opposite that. Then the side yard's in between, and there's never any overlap. They're separate yard requirements.
Member Yablon.
Sorry, and so for the front yard requirements, that's only measuring from the front and doesn't have anything to do with how close anything is on either side?
That's correct, though I would say that if this was only a front yard encroachment, which it's not, it's both a side and a front, if this was only a front, I would certainly tell the applicant beforehand that they should certainly try to align or meet the side yard requirement as well.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Bay.
Yeah, Carl, this is an attached garage by virtue of the fact that it's attached by a breezeway.
That's right.
If it was completely detached and there was not the breezeway that to be deemed to attach it, would the same setbacks apply, or would they be different?
Okay, yes, I can answer that question. So this I would like to say several things on that, if I may, please. So this property does not have a zoning required rear yard. If this were a detached garage can go both into the buildable area as well as into a zoning required rear yard with some regulations for that. This property cannot take advantage of that because it's a corner lot and doesn't have a zoning required rear yard. So that's number one. The other thing I will say is that if this was a detached garage, there is an encroachment allowance into corner lots on the long side frontage if it's detached, but I'd have to look at that. I can still take other questions, I can come back to that.
Member Zaransky.
I might have missed this, Carl. Do you have a slide that shows where the present house and carport sits?
So this is the existing carport with the storage structure behind, and then this is what's proposed, though I should have technically shaded this in between because they're proposed to be connected. And then the yellow shade is the existing home, which they're not making changes to that other than at the attachment point is my understanding.
But I guess how far is the existing from the property line?
So the existing one, at the furthest point, it meets the 9-foot side yard setback. It's over, actually, yeah, this is zoomed in. So this is the existing. So at the existing point, it meets the 9-foot setback requirement. At the closest point, it encroaches 1.35 feet. So the existing is partially non-conforming. What's proposed is probably more non-conforming, but I don't have those specific numbers.
Can you?
I guess I'm still kind of confused. How much closer are we getting to the property line with the proposed? The
simplest, the math to it is always one thing, but there's also just the bulk of what's going there, which is a little bit more different than the math. But the math is, let's see here, right now at the closest point, they're 7.65 feet, but that's at the closest point, which is this corner. As where they're proposing a 4.1 setback. So they're getting closer by, was that over 3.5 feet closer?
Thank you.
Member Hendrick.
Is it fair to say, Carl, that the easement did not exist, that the front yard request would be pretty minimal, it was like 2 feet?
Well, right, yeah, it would be reduced, whatever they're requesting, it would be reduced by 12.5 feet.
12.5, yeah.
That's
okay.
right.
And so I think they're requesting 14, so 1.5.
That's right, that is correct, sir.
All right, thank you.
Oh, and just to, if I could come back to Member Bay's question.
Yes.
On if this was a detached garage, so detached garages can encroach within a required front yard along the long side frontage on a corner lot. They have to be at least 22 feet set back. However, they do have to meet, they have to meet the minimum side yard requirement within that front yard. So, yeah, this one would still, well, we're talking about hypotheticals now if it was detached. I try not to go too far down that rabbit trail, but that's what the code is.
I think, yeah.
The other thing is, if this street, which could be an alley, were narrower, there wouldn't be a front yard setback at that point, because it would be a side yard at that point. If the easement were narrower.
Well, yeah, if this right of way was, well, let me just say, if this right of way was not deemed a street, then, well, yeah, I mean, this would change the property somewhat. I mean,
I just think it dovetails into what Member Hendrick said. Thanks.
Yeah, because on this point, what came to me was that those properties that are lot in depth that have the really long driveway with the potential for multiple houses off of it,
well,
versus this being deemed a street.
right, in that case, if this was considered just a driveway and the property behind a lot in depth, they would need to meet a 10-foot setback here. There's a requirement
Right.
that The building setback lines for all accessory uses and structures in the required rear yard of the frontmost lot adjacent to a lot in depth shall be 10 feet. Again, it's a
But then,
hypothetical.
it's all hypothetical, but then there'd be other setback requirements because of that hypothetical configuration. We're all just trying to wrap our
Plays into
hands around.
hardship, so it's-
Yes, exactly. Any other questions for Carl? Not seeing any?
Oh, just remember, this doesn't mean it's listed on any register or historic register. correct?
It is nationally, that is correct, but there's no local. It is, I believe, let me double check.
We'll let the applicant address that.
I thought,
Because my guess is Cal has that answer for you.
my memory was that it was national, but there's no local. And obviously, if there's a local designation, then they would also have to go to our Historic Preservation Commission. I specifically checked that with our Historic Preservation Commission staff liaison, Zubin Coleman. So this did not need to go to the HPC.
I assume it would have had, so.
Okay. Does the applicant like to make a presentation?
There's going to be three of us speaking, so I might as well swear us all in at the
Yes,
same time.
please. If you would please each get up and provide your name and address for the record.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, members of the zoning board, my name is Cal Bernstein. My address is 484 Central Avenue in Highland Park, and I'm the attorney for the applicant. We have the applicant here also, and the architect, so why don't you both come up here and be sworn in. And just give your name and address also, please.
Good evening. My name is Jan Ann Dubin. I live at 239 Park Avenue in Highland Park.
Nate Kipnis, I'm the architect, and class of 79 along with Cal.
And your address, please, sir.
1500 Hinman Avenue in Evanston, but a long time in Highland Park as well.
Thank you. Do you each hereby affirm or attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I've been officially outed, so now you can do the math and figure out how old I am now, so.
Well, I was going to make the Calvin with the Cheshire cat smile, but no, we won't go there.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the zoning board. I'll cut to the chase and try to address some of the questions that were asked. Member Beck, the question with regard, that's why I included the survey. Comes right off the City of Highland Park website. So this website, in the survey, which was done in 2020, indicated that this house is nationally registered, but is not considered a local landmark. However, the survey does identify it as a significant property. So I don't know if that answers your question.
What does that mean?
Well, that means is, if it was a local landmark, then before we would come to the zoning board, if you wanted to do anything to the property, you'd have to get what's called a certificate of appropriateness. And the certificate of appropriateness, we would have to then appear in front of the Historical Preservation Commission and make the exact same presentation we're making tonight, but they're going to be looking at it through a different lens. They're going to look at it through the lens of historical preservation. How does this design, the changes we're making, how does that impact the historical nature of the property? I have it in my presentation. I believe there are 21 criteria that the Historical Preservation Commission would use to try to analyze whether a certificate of appropriateness would be granted in this situation. With regard to the other thing you would involve, if there was going to be a tear down, if she decided that she didn't want to go forward and she wanted to tear down the house, most likely the fact that it's noted as a significant property, that she would get a year delay on the demolition. So that's where it comes locally. Nationally, it's just indicated that it meets the criteria for a national registry. You cannot, it doesn't impact the demolition of the house. All it does is it puts us on the national registry. And it's on the national registry because it's part of the three-lot subdivision with the other Dubin homes that are on the same block. So I don't know if that answered your question. Okay. With regard to Vice Chairman Bay's question with regard to if this is a detached garage. As Carl mentioned, detached garages can go in the rear yard. They can go, and under the code, as a matter of right, they could be 3 feet from the property line. Both what you consider the side, even though it's a rear yard, both property lines. So you could put a garage in a rear yard, 3 feet from both corners. In this situation, it doesn't apply because there is no rear yard on this property based on the zoning definition, because this is a corner lot. And as a corner lot, as Carl mentioned, you have 2 front yards and 2 side yards. So that provision of the code, which allows for detached garages within 3 feet of the lot lines, does not apply. But the policy is pretty consistent, that in the code, it does allow under certain circumstances to allow for a garage to be 3 feet from a property line. And to address, bless you, and to address Member Zaransky's question regarding the front yard, I think Member Hendrick mentioned it, I kind of identified it, is that if there was no easement, and this was that's a road, and the right-of-way is the road, then right now, the existing house encroaches 1.5 feet, the new garage with the house. So it's going to be, if we're using those numbers, it would be 1.5 feet into the front yard setback, or in this situation, because there's an easement, it's significantly more because it's 14.5 feet. So basically, it's to the eye, it's 40 feet, and that's where it's being lined up. I think I addressed all the questions, so I'm going to go dive right into my presentation. What I want to begin is what we didn't put in our letter of situation, is really talking about the historical nature of this property. After preparing for tonight, I did some additional research, and I looked at the City of Highland Park website and discovered what the 2020 survey said about this. Henry Dubin, which is the grandfather of the applicant, is a significant architect. He's defined, it's in here, there's a whole biography about Henry. The actual architect for this house and the other 3 houses on the block is Dubin and Dubin, and that's the applicant's father and uncle. And grandfather, excuse me. So the 3 of them were involved in designing all 3 of those houses. As the survey was completed by Lakota in connection with the Historical Preservation Commission, they noted, and it's on page 86 of the survey, of the reason why this is an important house in Highland Park. And just reading the last paragraph, it says, 239 Park Avenue was one of the 3 houses built in 1954 through 1955 and designed by Dubin and Dubin. It illustrates Wright Diem, which is Frank Lloyd Wright inspired style, and its long and low horizontal massing and its use of brick and vertical wood siding. The eaves have a deep overhang, and the recessed front entry has a skylight. So the survey designated this property as locally significant. The other houses on the block, which is 229 and 233, those are also Dubin homes. Those are also listed as locally significant homes, but they're not landmarked. And the other house on the block, which is 235, which the house that has the 3-car garage, I don't know if you went by the house, that house is not noted in the survey, and it's not noted as a significant home in Highland Park as to historical preservation. As Carl noted in the staff report, 229 Park Avenue appeared in front of the applicants, the owners appeared in front of this body in 2017 seeking a variance to construct a 2-car garage. In that situation, that house was not constructed with a breezeway. That house was constructed with an attached carport, and this zoning board in 2017 granted relief for the carport to be turned into basically a patio and like a covered porch type of situation, and then they put a garage directly to the north of that. So that is still considered attached, but that's the reason. There was no breezeway element on that property. The other property on the block, which is also locally significant, and it's a Dubin home, 233, also has a 2-car garage. However, that house was constructed with the 2-car garage. That was not added subsequent to the house, to the building of the house. As you can see, I think by the questions we've heard, I think you've kind of digested that this property is unique. As I said, it's a corner lot, no rear yard, 2 sides, 2 fronts. The north line, if Carl, you could put the survey on, I'd appreciate it. you can see the north property line. This lot's not a perfect rectangle. The north property line slants to the south, which basically cuts off, I'm going to call it that north side yard. And how the house is sited on the lot, because as you look to the south, it's sited 40 feet off of Park Avenue. And so, how way Dubin homes are, they're long, as pointed out in the survey, they're long, and as a result of just the style of home, this Wrightian style of home, is that it starts 40 feet, it extends further to the north, and it creates an area to the north that doesn't leave a lot of room to put a garage onto this property. So the existing storage area, as Carl pointed out, is already encroaching. So the house right now is existing non-conforming for several reasons. It's existing non-conforming on the east side because it encroaches into the front yard, significantly encroaches into the front yard. And then it's non-conforming on the north side to the side yard as a result of the storage shed encroaching into the side yard, I believe, by about 1.5 feet. So this house is the only remaining house that does not have a garage on this block. Nate Kipnis, who went to high school with, now you guys know that, he will describe why he designed this property and how he designed it. But I just want to, before I turn it over to Nate to describe how he designed the property, I want to just talk a little bit about the historical nature of it, and then I'll come back after Nate and talk about the standards. But I did talk to some people in the historical community about this property and say, how would you approach this? What would you, if this is obviously a locally significant home, how would you look at this? And the responses I received is that even though this is not a landmark property, the code section in the Historical Preservation Code regarding about its certificate of appropriateness is kind of a guide, should be used as a guide in what should be done to this property and how any changes to the property should be analyzed. And the Historical Preservation Code is section 24.030D. And I pulled that up, and just some of the criteria that the Historical Preservation Commission would have looked at. They would look at the height of the addition. They would look at the proportion of the openings, the rhythm of spacing and structures on the street, the rhythm of entrances, porches, storefronts, recesses, and other projects. They would look at the scale of the structure. They would look at the direction, expression of the front elevation. And most importantly, they would look to make sure that the alterations and the additions do not destroy the significant historical, architectural, visual nature of the home. And the reason why I bring that up is because the breezeway, which is going to be an issue tonight, most likely, is a character defining feature for this property. It creates the rhythm on the front of the property. It helps make this property historic. And so a lot of care has gone into tonight to designing a garage addition to modernize the house, to bring it into 21st century living, to allow, to basically replace what's a dilapidated carport that's falling down. A lot of thought, and Nate will talk about this, a lot of thought is going into trying to preserve also the historical nature of the property and try to balance that and create the spacing. That was the words when I talked to the historical preservation people. Those are the people, those are the words that they were talking about, is that they wouldn't want the spacing and the rhythm of the home to change. A garage is completely appropriate. There's, a garage was added across the street. There's a garage on the other Dubin home. However, the breezeway from an historical preservation, from that perspective, it's important. Practically, well, Nate will talk about, the breezeway is important because there's windows on that north elevation that you would lose if somehow you attached the house to the house. There's the gas meter there. The air conditioner condenser is in the breezeway, which all would have to be moved and try to be relocated if you lost the breezeway. So, I think I've talked enough, so I'm going to turn over to Nate. He could talk about why he designed the property the way he did, and then I'll come back and address the standards. And at the end, Jan would like to address the board also. Thank you.
Well, happy Earth Week, everyone. So, you know, there's a lot of things that went into why we did what we did, and Cal was just talking about the breezeway, and, you know, if you were driving here tonight, you saw the crazy rain going on, and we know that's only going to get worse and worse. Having a breezeway, a one-car breezeway, is just not acceptable anymore. Carport, to have a car exposed like that. And so to get a two-car garage, from a practical standpoint, this is as small as we could possibly make it. It's 20'6" on the interior, 20'2", I believe, front to back. Couldn't be shorter. It's about 8 feet to the overhang, and the ridge is at 10'2". I mean, honestly, this has got to be one of the smallest additions and requests that we've seen. And so, from a neighbor standpoint, what we're impacting to the neighbor could be light, could be vent, and could be noise. So we do a lot of sustainable work, probably 43 years of solar work. A 10'2" peak with a winter sun angle, which is going to be the deepest angle. Can you go to the image of the adjacent home?
Like that, or what?
No, there was a drawing. Yes, that one. You can see there's just a point coming in from the other home, and actually, I imagine that's not even to code with the setback, but we are not going to be casting a shadow on that, and certainly not a foot high anywhere on there. There are no windows on that building. We're not impacting ventilation. We're a very short building. The thing we are helping with tremendously is not having the condenser in the side yard, which 99% of the people would do. The condenser is going to be in that breezeway and will be significantly quieter than if it was up on that side yard. From a building standpoint, the way we designed it was to just keep this in line with the existing building. To make it go forward or make it go backward would draw way too much attention to it. And as Cal mentioned about the rhythm of voids and solids, that's part of that. And also, a mid-century modern home, a 1950s home, typically had a breezeway connection, didn't have the garage attached. And also, as Cal mentioned, there's windows in the existing home in that yellow section towards the back there's an office there. So if we were to attach that, we would lose light for sure. I think, you know, it's an honor to work on a house like this, and what we wanted to try and do is just try and make this fit in when it's all done, to be able to stand back and just say this belongs here, it doesn't stand out. Right now, Jan is doing work that is needed. We've analyzed the house, and so there's been some soffit work and fascia work, new roof and things like that. It's been painted. And there's more work to go, the front steps, et cetera, et cetera. So she's been very diligent about it. And when I first met her, she was very, quite positive about wanting to maintain that character. I mean, this is the house she grew up in. So I think that would cover it. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Member, you have
Want me to go first? You want to go first?
Oh, okay.
You.
Sure. Okay, I'm going first.
Okay.
Have you thought about any other placement? Like, I understand keeping the character as is and maybe having a breezeway and then like a covered patio and the garage to the south, like on the south side?
South side of the house?
Like something, like what other things have you
So
looked at?
that, when you look down Park Avenue, that's the side of the house, but it relates to the front of the houses up and down the street. So to have a garage in that area would really be odd, I think.
You would also have a front yard encroachment on Park Avenue because it's already set back 39 feet or 40 feet, and there's a 40-foot setback there. So you would have to ask for a significant encroachment on the Park Avenue, and we'd have a whole other set of neighbors coming back complaining about that.
We looked at a lot of different options. Jan would call and have ideas, and we would work through them. And, you know, those notches on the back are to avoid that tree. And we talked with the forester, Ben Ben Miller, about how the foundation system will go to minimize an impact to the roots. So is that going to be piers and a grade beam? Is it going to be a thickened slab? We are not going to put a standard foundation down 42 inches with the overdig being another 6 to 12 inches. And so that shape, there's a lot of things that impacted that shape. We wanted to keep on the east side, maintain the front of the house. We're honestly minimizing everything. The breezeway is what's existing, and making it any narrower just seems really tight. And then we're cutting it back and making the storage area as small as we possibly can. We're not, certainly we looked at options where the storage went all the way across and it was really sticking in there, and we moved the building front and back and everywhere. And this is really the right spot for it.
Vice Chair Bay?
I understand what Mr. Bernstein was talking about as far as wanting to maintain the spacing in a significant structure such as this, and why you wouldn't want to get rid of the breezeway. But it seems a little bit inconsistent to say that you want to maintain the spacing and the same style while adding an enclosed garage, but not being willing to get rid of the breezeway. I mean, isn't adding a garage changing the?
I asked the
This
exact,
was
I asked
addressed
that-
to the architect.
Yeah, I'm going to ask that, because I asked that exact question to the people in the Historical Preservation Commission, the commission, the community, because I talked to two different people who are very involved in historical preservation in Highland Park, and they said that the breezeway is, and Nate could talk about this also, but the breezeway is an important historical element to it. The carport is not, and with regard to, it's fairly common in these type of homes to try to create a garage, because you're trying to make these properties relevant for the 21st century without taking away the significant architectural element, and that's the breezeway. So the garage is not, by enclosing the carport and creating the garage, it's not inconsistent. And that's how they would look at it. And that's why I asked that question. Maybe Nate can expand if you'd like.
Well, and Cal mentioned this, we've also got the gas line there and the electric coming in. There's a lot of stuff going on in that breezeway, and to attach it is an extra cost to move all of that, and not insignificant numbers. So, again, all these things impact it, some of them more than others, but at the end of the day, that shape seems to be the best resolution that we could come up with.
Okay. It seems like you're kind of asking us to take it on faith that enclosing a carport doesn't change the shape and the flow, but getting rid of a breezeway would. You also mentioned the, relocating things. I mean, that's like the condenser. I would imagine the condenser could go on the west side of the house, or so, if you were concerned about the noise for the neighbors, that could be located.
The typical place the condenser goes is not to make noise into your backyard, it's to go into the side yard.
Okay.
And
Except that there are other considerations.
And so in this particular position, it would go into that niche, and it would be an amphitheater to the neighbor to the north.
All right, let me ask you also, I assume you're both familiar with the letter from the neighbor
I was going to address that.
that talks about the water and how the street, or the right-of-way for, to get to the houses is sloped downward, so the water tends to pool at the bottom of that. What consideration, and he's talking about it being, reducing more permeable ground space would exacerbate that problem. What consideration have you given to that and
Well,
trying to address that?
That's a good question, and I was going to address that in my presentation. But as you know, that any new construction in Highland Park requires a grading and drainage plan. And so if we left it alone, if nothing happened, if we let the carport fall down, nothing's going to change. The water situation's going to remain the way it is, and if it's a problem, it is. But under the building code, we are responsible for our own water. So when we apply for the building, if this application is granted and we apply for a building permit, in addition to filing architectural plans, we're going to have to file a grading and drainage plan, which would help and would address the question that he's facing right now, the fact that he's at a lower elevation. I mean, it would be beneficial for him to allow us to do some construction, because now we're forced to do a drainage and grading plan on that side of the property.
So you would anticipate that when all is said and done and the drainage, the additional drainage is provided, that would divert some of the water that would otherwise?
That would be a benefit. We're required under the code to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Member Zaransky?
Thank you. Few different questions. Getting back to looking at other options, just, I know this is not as convenient or desirable, obvious, but did you look at an option to, if the goal is to park 2 cars, a tandem garage?
Yep. Yeah, tandem garage is very difficult. We run into this all the time on the North Shore. Numerous communities have tight situations. A tandem garage just is never a really good convenience situation. And I don't even know how great that would be even in this geometry here, but
Dallas, as you notice, we looked at the survey, the property line slants to the south, so even if we did a tandem garage, most likely we'd be coming in for a variance further to the west, because the property line now, as you can see, if we're going with the frame structure that's currently existing behind, that's already encroaching. So most likely we'd be back here for another variance.
Right. I see what you're saying. And then back to the breezeway for a second here. So, I mean, you're showing, it's an 8-foot breezeway. Is that existing? It's 8 feet? Or
Yes.
So it's detrimental to shrink it by 2 feet and just pull away from the property line a little bit more?
At some point, it gets really tight.
But
And,
is 6 feet too tight?
well, I mean, this is, per the request of the owner to, like, she can see it, and she goes, this is good. This is what I would like to maintain.
Okay. Last question. This is maybe a Carl question or kind of a team combination question. Does the eave count as encroachment, or it's just, was the footing measured to the property line, or what's, because there's big eaves on this building. I assume you're going back with big eaves?
So we have minimal eaves on the north. You can see them.
Existing or?
No, the new ones will be minimized to the north.
Like how minimized, a foot?
Can you,
Which slide, oh, yes, of course.
The elevations.
That's the overhang, and then it hugs the building, then that's the big overhang, and then it hugs the building on the north. It's quite tight on there.
So like a foot, would you say? I mean, we're talking like, we're so close. I'm just, for,
I believe it's less than a foot.
Will they be further from the lot line than the existing carport eaves?
probably not, because.
No, because we're moving it way closer.
Moving it way closer.
With the carport, it's existing carport.
You can see it on the elevations. Minimal elevation.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about that.
So like the 4.2 from the closest corner to the property line plus eave, but obviously that eave isn't as big as you have now.
Right, the eave is very small. You
Right.
saw it, if you can move that image.
Because the one on there currently is, I mean, it's, could be three, it's big.
So there's four different elevations. The overhang projection varies. So from this elevation, which is looking south, there's more overhang on the east and west, but on the but this would be the north side
Yeah, it's
facing the
very small.
neighbor. The overhang is less there, but again, it's more on the north. There's more overhang on the north than the east and the west, facing the east and the west. Right, I mean, is that accurate?
Yeah. You can also notice on all of these elevations how low this building is, how shallow the roof pitch is.
Yeah, I didn't have an opportunity to mention this, but this is a fairly large lot, and just as a matter of right, you can build a house with double the FAR of this house. In addition, you can go 30 feet, 9 feet from the property line. So we're asking to go little over 10 feet, a fraction over 10 feet, 4.5 feet from the property line, or as a matter of right, a 30-foot house can be built 9 feet from the property line. And double the FAR, go from about 2,400 to over 5,000 square feet. So you can build a pretty large house on this property.
Just for clarification, Cal, am I to understand that the setback, the front yard setback is affected by the fact that this is, in essence, a right-of-way as opposed to being measured from where an actual street would be?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, painful.
Yes, because we're almost, as Member Hendrick mentioned earlier, we're almost compliant as the house is existing to the street and where the lot line is. However, because there's that easement for the right-of-way which extends into our front yard, and that's technically where they have to, based on the code, that's technically where they have to measure the front setback. So that's why it's 14 and a half feet from our, so 14 and a half feet of our property we don't get credit for setbacks because of that easement.
And we've had that on other properties before.
The, oh, sorry.
I was going to ask Member Beck, because he sort of gave me a hand earlier.
You
You go,
No, go ahead. No, I can wait. I'm patient.
Okay, well, I was going to double back to the tandem garage, because if we're talking about historical preservation and what it looks like, if it's a tandem garage, you're able to keep all the proportions looking the same versus adding on an additional 10 feet.
I have a particular hatred of tandem garages. I mean, it's
Okay,
just.
talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, you know, I could say, would you like that? I mean, we've made a joke with clients, like what you do is you get two identical cars and you have a little bag you pick up and put into the other car, because when you have to pull out two cars, it's crazy.
I would also mention that in keeping with the Dubin houses, the two across the street both have two-car garages. So as to historical nature, one of the Dubin houses was constructed with a two-car garage. The other one was added later, but it was in keeping with the design, the Dubin and Dubin design, because that's what they did. I mean, obviously, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't go back and figure out why they didn't do this with this property, because it probably would have been much easier. We wouldn't have this headache if they did this, because the property to the north was developed, significantly after these three houses were built. So if your father and your uncle and your grandfather would have put a two-car garage, we wouldn't be dealing with this, but this is what the hand we were dealt.
Okay. Just so you, what you can know to say to me too is that I'm having a hard time with saying it's so historical, so important, but let's change it.
Well, obviously, that's why the city has that process of certificate of appropriateness, because the city recognizes that historical homes are not that they have to be frozen in place. That's why they have those 21 criteria. But the important thing is trying to preserve as much as you can as the house has to evolve.
I understand that. I'm just saying if we're talking about how important this breezeway is and how important this is and how important that is.
I think you've pointed out that's the juggling that we do. It's, you can pick one and lock it, or what do you do? So there's a lot of options. It's a moving target. And at the end of the day, this worked with the best answering all the criteria we were working with.
I don't know if you know who Susan Benjamin is. Susan Benjamin's one of the foremost authority on historical preservation. She was actually one of the contributors to the survey. She's the person I talked to. I talked to two people. She was one of them. And what she told me was that she considered the design, the breezeway as an important design feature of this home. The garage is secondary. I mean, that was what Susan told me, and she's one of the authors of the report. She's probably one of the foremost authorities in the entire area on historical preservation. I asked her to come tonight, but she had another engagement.
Member Beck.
So, Mr. Kipnis, your opening comment was that, we had this terrible weather tonight, and it's only going to get worse. Yet you stand here and say you want to preserve this breezeway.
Covered breezeway.
But what, wind can't go sideways?
Or rain.
Well,
It's gonna get worse. So-
I parked my car in the garage because there's hail possible, and I'm not going to, I can walk here with an umbrella.
So how is maintaining the breezeway congruent with your desire to update this to a 21st century house, considering the changes in our weather that we're having?
So we could attach it and not have any historical continuity there. So we're not attaching it, we're covering it. You can look at the multiple hundreds of thousands of homes in Chicago that are all detached, but they're a garage, they're not a carport. So we deal with it in this climate. And I think that the attached breezeway is perfectly fine. This is only 8 feet. It's not like you're in Chicago where it's 80 feet to the house.
One of the other things that this board often puts great weight on is, did you engage with the neighbors before you brought this to us?
Yes, the applicant, you talked to the neighbors. She's going to talk about that. She's the one, she did the neighbor outreach, so that's part of our presentation.
Right, and then one of the things that the neighbor brings up in their letter is the issue of what sounds like adverse possession, that they can lay claim to some of their property.
Yes, and in response, I would say that that's not before the zoning board tonight.
That would affect what's.
No, that's not, actually would not affect it, because the property he's talking about is not where the structure is going. But I would note that this is not, there's no action currently for adverse possession. This was news to us when we read the letter, that if we're unable, I will advise the neighbors here tonight, I would state that if it's not resolved amicably between the property owners with regard to that issue, I'm sure that it will have to be resolved civilly, and then in civil court. So it doesn't impact this, because this is our property. There is no, as of now, his legal description does not include the property he claimed in that letter, and we don't know anything about that. We just got that a couple days ago when I got the packet. We're investigating in that, and in the appropriate venue and forum, that will be addressed. But this is not that appropriate, this is not the forum or the venue.
Member Trushansky.
Have you looked into building like a 1.5 car garage? So a garage that's not quite a 2-car garage, but that's bigger than what you currently have, that could easily fit at least 1 car in there and give you some storage?
That really wasn't part of what we were looking at.
I will mention there's actually 2 cars at this house, and if you had a 1.5 car, the idea is trying to get the cars off the driveway, because talking about, because the driveway, again, this is to the north elevation, so if you had a 1-car garage, you're basically committing to having a car on that driveway every night. And I would think that the policy, at least the policy of the city, is trying to get cars off of driveways and into garages and out of front yards. And that would be in the front yard on the street, and I would think that, you're doing a balancing act. Would you rather have a car permanently parked in a front yard, or would you rather have it in a garage?
Okay, I mean, because, if you drive around, especially in East Highland Park, and you look at these older homes, I mean, a ton of older homes have 1-car garages. I mean, that's kind of,
Yes, yeah.
a feature of those older homes, right? So-
Yes, and obviously, this board has heard a lot of cases over the years, and Carol is laughing, but you've heard a lot of cases where people are trying to ask for variances in order to create a 2-car garage out of a 1-car garage, and it's a fairly routine ask in front of the zoning board. I'm not saying there's any precedent or that it's always granted, but it's fairly routine that sometimes, some nights I've sat here and there's 3 or 4 garage cases. And so I think that this is kind of in that same vein, is that, when those houses were created, people had 1 car, they have 2 cars. And so the question is, do you want that car on the driveway or on the street? Or do you want that in a garage? And I think that it's a very small street. I think that it's probably not a good idea to be parking that permanently in the street, especially during the time of year where you can do that. And I think that's the reason why people come in front of this board looking for relief in order to build a 2-car garage.
Thank you.
Member Hendrick.
Let's talk about the first standard.
I haven't got to the standards yet.
So let me just direct you, I guess, or lead you into this a little bit to address what I'm thinking or wondering about. So Member Zaransky asked you, couldn't you take just even a foot or 2 feet off the breezeway and move it that much closer? And the response seemed to be, maybe, but we don't want to do that. I mean, that was what I heard. That, to me, is trouble with the first standard. That is in conflict. And I agree with the statement that we do evaluate two-car garages. I don't think the ask here is unreasonable. It's probably the minimum to do a two-car garage like the architect said. But having said that, it seems that there is some give with the breezeway and maintaining, even if everything you said is true. So I'm having a hard time with that standard. So can you tell me, enlighten me on that?
Can I retract that and say that if you start narrowing it with the condenser, do you want a 3-foot hallway in there? Like, no, you don't. And if we made it narrower, boy, a 20-foot wide garage might want to be, we'd come in for a 22. It's like, this is a really narrow garage.
So how wide is the breezeway right now?
8 feet, and we're asking for 8 feet. We're not asking for more.
Yeah, but so like if you took 2 off, like Brad said, it's 6, it's not 3. I mean,
With a 3-foot,
How wide's the condenser?
yeah, it's going to be 30 plus 33 inches, and you need clearance. You can't put it up on the wall. You need a little bit of airflow behind it.
So what's really, probably a better answer to that question is that they're trying to pack a lot into that breezeway because you have, if you have the gas meters, you have the electric meter, you also have and you have the condenser. And the condenser needs clearance, and as a result, we could go back, if really it's a foot or two, if that's the issue, we can go back and look at it and come back to, we really didn't talk about that. We can look at that, but there's a lot already going on in that breezeway that we have to deal with. And it's not just as simple as just moving a foot or two.
is that the actual reason that the breezeway is significant? Is that the cost of moving all of this stuff would be too high?
Well, it factors into that. And the other thing, which this drawing is actually not correct on, there is a corner window on that office. So now when you're in the office, now you're looking at a 6-foot wall away from you. So
So to get to the point, it's one of the factors. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be one of the factors because to move the condenser to the other side, then you have to extend all those lines. And you also have to remember this is a long linear house. And in order to get, the farther you get the condenser away from the house, then the issues you have on the south side from a mechanicals perspective, because it's a long house, and you don't want to put the condenser too far away from the house. But if it's a foot or two, we can look at it, but that's something we'd have to discuss as a team.
Okay. My hang up is in the actual language of the first standard, saying it can, if permitted to be used only under the conditions. That's my struggle, and I understand that it sounds silly, but like if there is 1 or 2 feet, and we're literally sitting in these meetings debating feet, a couple feet, it does seem to me like there is some give, so it can't possibly be the only avenue here, so.
Okay, that's something we can look at.
Okay, I'm just,
Yeah.
that's where my.
If it's something we can look at, I don't have an answer for you right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this moment?
Okay.
We're back to you.
Now, back to me, I'll go back to the standards. Well, reasonable return, the first standard. Obviously, this is a unique shape. There's no garage on this lot, on this house, where every house on this block has at least a 2-car garage, and the neighbor to the north has a 3-car garage. There's not a desire to make more money from this house. If you wanted to make more money from this property, you tear it down and you build a 5,000 square foot house at 30 feet, and that's probably the highest and best use for this property. But we have someone obviously who's looking to preserve and maintain a historical home. The hardship, I think we've kind of hit on the hardship. We spent a lot of time talking about the unique lots site, the unique lot, how the lot line slants, how the house is situated on the lot, and the site context, the historical nature of the property and the house and the area, and the road easement. So those are all things that lead to the hardships, and obviously there's a unique situation on this property that is not generally applicable to other properties in this zoning district. And I want to talk about the essential character of the neighborhood. As there was a lot of talk about whether a garage is appropriate or a tandem garage. If you look on the block, every house, there's only 4 houses, but 3 of the 4 houses have garages that face, 2-car garages that face the street. And there's one house that has a 3-car garage facing the street. This is the only house without a garage. So in order to keep the house relevant and keep this and preserve this historical home for many, many years, so someone doesn't come along and say, I can't get a garage and there's a 2-car garage, so therefore I'm going to go, 5,000 square feet and 30 feet up. In order to keep this house relevant, the small ask here is to allow for a 2-car garage at the minimal size 2-car garage as possible. Lastly, I want to address the letter that's in the packet. As we discussed earlier, that the house is already non-conforming as to side yard and front yard. We're just looking to extend the existing non-conformity a couple feet on the north side, and I think that's the issue. The proposed garage, it abuts the neighbor's garage to the north, and that's a 3-car garage. And as Nate pointed out, that south elevation doesn't have any windows. So what's the impact? Our garage is going to be looking at their garage, and there's no windows at that garage. So it's not impacting any of the living space of the neighbor to the north. In addition, if you lose the breezeway, then it negatively impacts this property because you lose windows that are on the north elevation of the existing house, which are right there. No more pointers anymore, but it's right on the north side of the property. If this was a traditional property, and there was a front yard, 2 side yards, and a rear yard, under the code, we could build a detached garage 3 feet from the property line. So if this somehow wasn't interpreted to be a corner lot because that's an alley versus an alley versus versus a corner lot and a right of way there, potentially we could have put in a rear yard there, we could have put a detached garage 3 feet from the property line.
In the rear yard.
In the rear yard. If it's
Not in the side yard, which this would technically then be the side yard.
No, if it's not a corner lot.
But if it weren't, this would be an extension of the house and it would be in a side yard, not in the backyard.
I'm not so sure about that. If this was
Take your buildable square.
yes. I'm thinking detached. I'm saying if it's a detached garage.
And if
An
it was
attached garage,
detached, it would need to be in the rear.
it would be it. So if the front yard would be along Park Avenue. And then the side yards would be where the stem is right now and the other stem, and the rear yard would be the north property line.
Depends on which one you count as
Yeah,
street.
but that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But the bottom line is that the code contemplates the ability to put a garage 3 feet from a property line in a rear yard. And in this situation, we don't have a rear yard. We talked about the drainage and grading plan, that it will also improve it. We talked about the sunlight and airflow. Again, you can have a garage in a rear yard 3 feet from the property line, so it's obviously, the code doesn't believe that it impacts rear airflow. We've been now notified about the encroachment, the answer Member Beck's question, and that will have to be dealt with in a different forum. We had the arborist come out and look at, and the city forester come out and look, and we are confident that we'll be able to construct this without negatively impacting the tree as the neighbor pointed out. The suggestion of removing the breezeway is not practical, as we talked about, because of what's going on there. There's a lot functioning. There are a lot of functions going on in that breezeway between the gas meter, the windows, and the air conditioner condenser. And it's not practical because also the window on the north side. And we talked about the historical preservation issue. Looking at that lens, we're trying to keep the breezeway to preserve a defining feature of this mid-century modern home. Jan's going to come up, and she's got a very short presentation, very short. She wants to address the board, and it's not very long. And We appreciate your consideration. We get that this is a tough ask, but this is a tough property, and this is a significant home, and we're doing our best to try to preserve it and maintain it for generations to come. So Jan, why don't you come up and close this out?
Member Chair, can I have one technical point?
Yes, Carl?
Member Beck, would you be as kind as to put your microphone closer to you? There was a comment by the Vic downstairs.
Sorry. So, good evening. And again, my name is Jan Ann Dubin. I want to thank everybody for their time and thoughtful questions. I appreciate the opportunity to share remarks, and I will attempt to be brief. My comments will focus on the history of the Dubin family and 100 years of architecture in Highland Park, and I want to briefly introduce myself. 3 generations of Dubin architects have grown up and lived in Highland Park for more than 100 years. My grandfather, Henry Dubin, was a well-known architect, having studied at the University of Illinois and then later in life in Paris at the Beaux-Arts School of Architecture and Design. He returned to Highland Park with fresh and globally influenced ideas. He built high-rise and residential dwellings and a number of Highland Park residents, including the famous Battle Deck House on Cedar. Henry was one of the first preservationists, concerned when the Louis Sullivan Stock Exchange building was attempted to be demolished and subsequently was, of what would become of the ornamental appointments on the facade. Historical preservation of important design mattered to him, and I see my role today as curator to carry forward that Dubin family legacy. An expert in construction disputes, my father was a prolific writer and wrote the AIA's Encyclopedia chapter on professional responsibility. A fellow of the American Institute of Architects, the highest distinction awarded an architect, he served as AIA's Chicago chapter president and as president of the Illinois Institute of Architects. In 2003, he funded an AIA Dubin Family Young Architect Award, which continues today. In fact, Nate Kipnis and I would be at the award ceremony tonight in Chicago if we weren't here for this important meeting. An iteration of my family's architecture firm after Dubin and Dubin was the firm of Dubin, Black, and Matusame. It was the first racially integrated firm in Chicago and one of the first in the country, with the addition of John Matusame. My father, Dave Dubin, was a fastidious and meticulous man. He served as an arbiter in construction disputes. Dave Dubin lived by the credo of Highland Park, which is character counts. He would be proud that I'm here today requesting a variance to preserve and modernize 239 Park Avenue by adding a 2-car garage in keeping with the house's original, modest, and elegant mid-century design, footprint, and character. I grew up in this house, and over the last several years as I've moved back, both when my parents were ill and subsequently as I bought the house, I've heard from neighbors how my dad would help them, including Lauren Sawinski, who sold her house to Todd Rosenthal in 2019. In addition to helping neighbors, he and other Dubin family members gave back to the community. My uncle, for many years, my Uncle Arthur Detmers Dubin, served on the beautification committee for the city of Highland Park and other committees. My parents donated a water fountain in honor of my grandparents and great aunt and uncle, which is located by the gazebo at Laurel and Linden. And my dad actually worked on the designs, which he did on a pro bono basis for that gazebo. When I first started the design project and process, I interviewed a number of architects, all of whom were AIA fellows, which was an important designation, and they were referred to me by the American Institute of Architects. I specifically chose Nate Kipnis as he grew up in Highland Park, and at the time, he lived in a mid-century modern house on Sheridan Road. He specialized in mid-century modern design and sustainability, which were all things important to me. When we first met, he listened to my ideas. He intuited that I wanted to create an updated mid-century modern house built for 2050. In working together over the last few years, Nate and I have painstakingly tried to follow that edict, which isn't the easiest or the most efficient route forward.
My request today for this variance is to preserve the design and architectural features which hallmark mid-century design, including the important interplay between outdoor and indoor space. My house aligns with the other houses on the lane, which my former neighbor, Steve Sowinski, used to fondly refer to it as Dubin Lane. We now just call it the lane. Nate and I believe we've accomplished the objective in the proposed designs, and hopefully, if we're fortunate, my fiancé and I, David, will live in the house for many years to come. So I appreciate your listening to my comments. I would be happy to entertain any questions of me that you might have. Yes.
Can I ask one first, Member Beck? Can you just, would you let the panel know when the Waxing Moon Jupi Descendant Trust was created?
Yes, I believe it was so it was an amalgamation of two trusts. I could also explain the name if anyone is curious, but it's
No, I'm more interested in the origination date.
it was created in 2019 when I bought, my mother died in 2017, my father in 2013. And I had moved into the house with my Shetland sheepdog and my mom's Shetland sheepdog to care for her for the last 7 months, having lived in the city for many years prior to that. Given kind of the Dubin ghost that haunted that house, and I don't mean my parents figuratively, I mean the importance of the architecture, I couldn't bear to give up the house. I really felt like I needed to restore and preserve it, and subsequently, I still have a place in the city, but moved from the city to Highland Park. The pandemic somewhat influenced that decision. I had a cavalcade of friends from the city that came out to be able to sit in a backyard with trees and not worry about neighbors in a cubicle in a high-rise in the city. So I've enjoyed being back in Highland Park since 2017.
Thank you. Member Beck?
So Mr. Bernstein said that you would address how you engaged with the neighbors before bringing this to the commission. Could you do that, please?
Sure. So I have talked to all of the neighbors, including Todd Rosenthal, who is my neighbor to the north. So he was aware of it. I actually circulated the original design, which the one you see has been modified from several months ago. I tried to be a courteous neighbor in, I sent the designs, and I specifically dropped off for Todd because I had been sick a couple weeks ago, but all the materials relevant to this in advance of this hearing, so that he had this in advance and could contemplate, what I was planning to do. I have talked to all of the other 5 neighbors, in addition to the Rosenthals that were required by the city. All are supportive and, approve of what I'm looking to do and plan forward.
So there were no concerns that he raised that you were able to incorporate into this plan?
The only thing Todd raised with me via a text was a focus, well, several things. His comments were that he wanted to, could I not get rid of the breezeway, suggesting that my house was, I believe his words were, not in alignment, I could pull up the text, but not in alignment and in keeping with the other houses on the lane, which was sort of perplexing to me because I've worked really hard with Nate both to preserve and be consistent with the designs we've looked at for the house and make sure that they are in keeping with the lane. And as Cal and Nate have both pointed out, I have a carport that is in need of repair and replacement, where every other car, with the exception of the Rosenthal house, has a 2-car garage, enclosed
I think the
2-car
point might
garage.
be that there are no other houses on the lane that have carport breezeways anymore.
They never had breezeways. The history of how the property was acquired is my grandfather, Henry, and a man named Meyer Hatowski each bought 2 plots of land for their kids. My dad and uncle were delighted. One of the Hatowskis was thrilled. The other sister said, there's no way on God's earth I'm going to live next to my sister, and promptly sold the land, which is the property now Todd's house resides in.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Ms. Dubin? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone from the public who wishes, sir, if you'll please come up? You'll provide your name and address for the record.
Todd Rosenthal, 235 Park Avenue, Highland Park.
Do you hereby affirm or attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So Jan spent quite a bit of time introducing her family, so I think it's important for people to understand a little bit of background about me. As I talk to people, I like people to know who I am. I've actually done a little bit of research into all of you guys and have an understanding of who I'm talking to. As I mentioned, my name is Todd Rosenthal. I live with my wife and 2 children at 235 Park Avenue, just north of Jan's house at 239 Park Avenue. I'm a lifelong resident of Highland Park, and my kids have only lived in Highland Park. I uprooted my wife from New York City and made her move to Highland Park over 20 years ago. While I try to maintain a low profile, I actively support the community in a number of different ways. As a couple examples, I have been on the volunteer board of directors for the Highland Park region of AYSO for roughly 13 years. I was the regional commissioner for 3 years of that organization. I've been the registrar for the last 13 years. So I have extensive experience with the Highland Park AYSO organization. Last year, after the July 4th parade shooting, I helped bring the community together and raised over $20,000 by selling Highland Park Strong magnets and stickers. In fact, I'm starting to sell an updated design to benefit the school district, so if anyone's interested in purchasing one, please let me know. I'll be getting them tomorrow, delivered to my house. Enough about me. The reason why I'm here is to express my opposition for the proposal for 239 Park Avenue. To encroach, my original statement was about the encroachment of 5 feet on the side setback. If you can go to the setback slide, I do not, I consider. Which slide would you like, sir? This slide is fine. Okay. I consider this dark line extending all the way forward. So I am also, I guess, opposing the front yard setback, because the front yard also encroaches into the side yard. It is closer than 9 feet. As a little bit of background on the situation, some of which you've already heard, this is a historic private street with mid-century ranches on wide lots designed by Dubin. I'm not against that. I'm not opposing that. I completely agree. I think it's awesome that everyone's kept the houses on the street as they are. My family moved to the street, though, specifically due to the spacing between the houses and the privacy that it provides. We moved from another house in Highland Park, which did not have 9-foot setbacks. The move to our current house was to help guarantee more space between our house and the other houses so that we have more privacy for my family. If the city were to grant our neighbor this variance, it would actually put the new garage structure closer to our house than was the garage of the previous house that we lived at. The area between the existing carport of 239 Park Avenue and our house was essentially abandoned by the previous and current owners. In 2004 and 2005, the area was completely landscaped by the previous owner of my house, and the landscaping is consistent with the rest of the landscaping on my property. The landscaping was maintained by the owner of my house and continues to be maintained by myself and my wife. We have significant landscaping and very little grass on our property, so we are out there every weekend doing some sort of work. I have purposely not cleaned up the area between the existing carport and our property this spring to see if the owner or landscaper of 239 Park Avenue would actually maintain the property as they do the rest of the property at 239 Park Avenue. The landscaper did spring cleanup, but did not clean up the area between our two houses, as they should have, because it is part of the 239 Park Avenue property. That didn't come as a surprise to me. The stone wall edging next to the property is also completely knocked over from trucks that have hit it. It's been like that for a month, and I have purposely not reset it up, as I usually do. The area is completely covered in leaves from the fall, exactly how I left it. In addition to the landscaping, in 2004, and there's a permit for this that we can go back to, an automatic sprinkler system was put in place on my property. This system also covers the area between 239 Park Avenue's carport and my house. There's at least 4 sprinkler heads in this area that are not actually on my property. The city and the owner of 239 Park Avenue would have never allowed for installation of sprinkler heads on a neighboring property without approval from that owner. In addition to the landscaping and the sprinklers, in 2020, I had an invisible fence pet containment system put in around my property. The invisible fence extends onto the neighboring property to about 2 feet from the existing carport. Again, the property owner had no concerns with this installation. All 3 of these items basically show that the owner of 239 Park Avenue has basically abandoned the land on the north side of the carport. I've reached out to the property owner to discuss the variance, and through a text message I was told, I quote, "I believe that the proposed design is keeping with and in alignment with other houses on the lane," end quote. There wasn't, while I would love to chat about it more, there wasn't really, I was never given an opportunity. Jan has not been open to really discussing alternate options. There's 2 additional houses on the lane that are also designed by Dubin. Both have already built 2-car garages. The neighbor across the lane also built a significant area for storage. Both of these neighbors have built and were able to keep their significant spacing between houses. Both of these houses built attached garages to minimize the amount of space required. I have pictures printed out if anyone's interested in seeing the 233 Park Avenue or the 229 Park Avenue properties. A variance should only be granted in a truly unique circumstance. Each of these houses had a similar circumstance that they were able to overcome. So the circumstance at 239 Park Avenue is far from unique. While I do understand the desire for the property owner to add a 2-car garage, the proposed placement of the garage is a mere convenience, and it inflicts a number of hardships on my property. I want to focus on these hardships that the proposed plan creates for myself and my family. The first hardship is privacy. As I already mentioned, the neighborhood and the private lane that we lived on were designed with privacy in mind. The landscaping was designed as a barrier to the existing carport and helps provide screening, since our house is actually angled in the direction of 239 Park Avenue. Removing this mature landscaping will be necessary to build the new garage, which will have a detrimental effect on the overall aesthetics of the property, and will put the garage in direct view from the main living area in our house. In fact, I noticed a handful of you guys actually drove by and looked at the property right before this meeting. That's how, we live in the front part of our house. I can see the carport and the garage directly from the house. The landscaping today provides that screening. There is no landscaping plan included with the designs, and with limited space remaining on the neighboring property, landscaping would be limited if it exists at all, and will not replace the existing screening that's already mature and provides privacy. From viewing the proposal in the packet, I wanted to make sure it's clear that my driveway is just over 4 feet from the proposed structure, and even less than 4 feet from the roof line of the new structure. You tell me, is that consistent with the privacy that exists today, that you can see in the photos that were shown earlier? The second hardship is water. Sorry, I lost my spot. Our current private street has significant water issues since it sloped downward. Water from any type of rain flows down from the higher properties along Park Avenue through my property and through 233 Park Avenue and eventually into a ravine. During rain, parts of our driveway currently flood due to the downhill water flow. And while I would love to resolve this issue, estimates have been extremely costly. I do have a recent picture printed out if anyone cares to see it. The issue is significantly worse during moderate and heavy rains. In fact, during heavy rains, the flooding will be so bad that it will seep into my garage. Enlarging the structure at 239 Park Avenue and moving it closer to my driveway is enough to make the water issues even worse. The permeable ground that is not currently enough to absorb the water moving downhill is being reduced significantly. But to make matters even worse, when I look at the proposed design, downspouts are planned to empty at ground level. This will add a significant amount of water in any rain event, further compounding my water issues. I understand what was mentioned about creating a plan, but there isn't a plan today. The third hardship is sunlight and airflow. The previous owner and myself have spent significant amounts of money on landscaping. And as I mentioned, myself and my wife are out there pretty much every weekend maintaining the landscaping. There are numerous plants on that side of the property that require sun and airflow. Moving the current structure closer, along with the expanded roof line and the peaked roof of the garage, will have an impact on the sun and air that my property receives and these plants require. This will have a detrimental effect on anything growing on the south side of my house. The fourth hardship is tree health. Highland Park prides itself on being part of the Tree City USA program. The city has a commitment to preserving trees, yet the proposed plan has a significant negative impact on trees. Just to expand the driveway, the plan calls for the removal of 4 trees, 20 inches, 16 inches, 5 inches, and 5 inches. This is almost 50 inches of trees that will be ripped out simply to expand the driveway. The plan also has the garage within the critical root zone and drip line of a heritage oak tree on my property. The garage will also be a couple feet away from an 18-inch tree that is also on the property line. The health of both of these trees is severely at risk, even if the appropriate precautions are put in place. While I did discuss the concerns with the city forester, and he stated that a tree preservation plan will need to be approved, this simply reduces the risk. No one can truly determine what the impact will be to these trees, and if they start to die, they will be my responsibility to resolve. It's unfortunate that the proposed plan really doesn't take into consideration the natural beauty that the trees provide and will be forever lost. My fifth and final hardship is money. I will incur significant costs to pay for additional landscaping and a fence on my property to try to replicate the existing screening that has been grown for over 20 years. I'll be required to pay to move sprinkler heads and sprinkler pipes that have covered the neighboring property for the last 19 years. I will also be required to spend money to move the existing invisible fence that has been in place for several years. These are not insignificant costs that I will need to incur due to the proposed plan. Based on zoning ordinances, a proposed variance should not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood. I have highlighted 5 ways that the proposed plan is injurious to my family and my property. These items will have a negative impact on my property value, and they will disrupt the current aesthetic of our neighborhood. All of my concerns can potentially be alleviated by the 239 Park Avenue owner either removing the breezeway that's planned and attaching the garage, or shrinking the breezeway. This completely eliminates the need for a side variance, and as I mentioned earlier, it aligns 239 Park Avenue with the other 2 houses on the private lane that also have similar designs with an attached garage. If there's technical reasons why this is not a viable plan, my concerns continue to exist, and I continue to oppose the variance and request that the variance not be approved due to the hardship that it creates to my property. To address a couple of the points made earlier, the house is several feet higher in elevation higher than my house, so yes, the structure is only 10 feet tall, but when you add the elevation change, it's over 12 feet higher than my house. As far as the air conditioner condenser in the breezeway, that is very easy to move, and I'm totally fine with the condenser being moved closer to the property line. While I understand the historical significance, the other 2 houses do not have breezeways, and they are still historically significant. The electric is in the breezeway, but according to the plan, the electric is actually being relocated. The overhang on the north side are not minimized. If you want to go to actually this picture's fine. You can see the overhang over here and around.
Do you want to use the mouse? You can use the mouse if you'd like, sir.
All of this overhang is actually in the side setback. As for the idea of a tandem garage, I would potentially be supportive of a tandem garage. A tandem garage is currently being built across Park Avenue by another house that actually was here, I think months ago, requesting a variance to build their tandem garage. I also have essentially a tandem garage. Everyone's been referring to my garage as a 3-car garage. The left garage door is completely inoperable. Because of the heritage oak tree, the driveway does actually, it goes around there, but there is no way to maneuver a car in there. So I have a 2-car garage. It is actually a tandem garage as well, so I can park 3 cars in there. And having 3 drivers, it has not been a big deal to move cars around. And mind you, Jan currently lives alone with a single car. If the significance of the house is the breezeway, then why don't the other 2 Dubin houses all have breezeways? I thank you for your time and consideration.
Vice Chair Bay.
Thanks. As I understand it, you're, in essence, treating the property between the houses as yours, even though it has not, as of yet, been adjudicated to be yours. So you're talking about some of your expenses as far as moving your fence and your underground sprinkler is really on property that, again, hasn't been adjudicated as your property.
When I moved in, that was the situation that it was. The landscaping was consistent with my landscaping. The sprinklers were already on the property. The city approved the placement of the sprinklers. The neighbor approved the placement of the sprinklers. So yes, I've been treating the property as mine, because if I didn't, it wouldn't be maintained.
Well, if your neighbor was to come onto that property, which is currently legally theirs, and started moving out the landscaping and making some improvements on their property, how would you deal with that?
I'd be fine with that. If the neighbor wanted to maintain the property, I'd be fine with it. Am I okay with a structure being that close to my property line? If you look, my driveway is actually right here. I can reach out and actually touch the side of the building from my driveway.
Is there anything that you can think of that would have you change your mind and be in favor of this ask if they were to do the requisite drainage plans, if they were to do the requisite landscaping, or anything of that nature? Are you willing to work with them in that regard?
I'm willing to work with them, but from my perspective, the actual structure needs to be moved further away from the property line.
So really, that's the only thing you would favor, is if not having the structure where they're asking to put?
Correct. Am I okay with some level of variance? Possibly. I'd explore options with Jan if she was open to it. But up to this point, it was, hey, we've reviewed a bunch of options, and this is the best option.
Okay, that's all I got right now. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Student.
In regards to the invisible fence, you said it encroaches into the applicant's property by 2 feet, right?
It's 2 feet away from her carport, so it's more than 2 feet.
Okay. So if this plan were to go ahead and they were to build that garage, can you talk to me a little bit about like what would need to happen with the invisible fence, or if that would be a concern or anything like that?
I would have to move the invisible fence over, along with the sprinkler heads.
But for the invisible fence, the way I understand it is it's like something under, or,
They dig a trench, so
Okay.
I can pay them just like I did to install it, to basically move it.
okay. And would that be like a significant cost or anything like that?
I would say that's less significant than moving sprinklers, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Did the issue of the sprinklers show up when you had a survey done when you purchased the house?
It did not.
It did not. Okay.
When you got when you got the invisible fence put in, did you ask Jan, hey, can I put the invisible fence? No?
I did not, because the property wasn't being maintained by Jan, and it was landscaped consistently with the rest of my landscaping, and I had been maintaining it before I installed the invisible fence.
Okay.
Were you under the impression that that property was yours, or that it had been ceded to you, or you just treated it like it was yours even though you knew it wasn't?
I treated it like it was mine because it wasn't maintained by the owner of that house.
But regardless, it's still her property, right? I mean, if you're going to put the invisible fence within her property, I mean, that's legally still her property. You should have probably gotten her permission to do that.
Okay.
You don't pay taxes
Carl?
on it, right?
I do not pay taxes on it.
Carl, did you receive an email from the city's attorney?
Well, right, Chair, would you
Could
like
you
me to
just-
comment briefly on that?
What?
Would you like me to comment on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so at the chair's request, the chair had requested that I make the city's corporation council aware of this application and aware of the applicant's letter. So our corporation council, obviously, they haven't had the benefit of any of the testimony this evening. They had the benefit of the packet, which included the letter and as well as the survey, and I also provided the deeds that the applicant submitted for ownership. And so emails are attorney-client privilege, but I will paraphrase it though for the relevant parts for the, because it's meant for the board. So essentially, Corporation Council, based on what they read in the letter in the packet, long story short, the question of the adverse possession or whether or not it's abandoned, it's not an issue for the Zoning Board of Appeals. Obviously, the Zoning Board of Appeals
Agreed.
We knew that.
should focus on the request for the zoning variations and whether or not those meet the standards of approval. I can summarize it by saying that.
I agree with that. I mean, whoever's land it is, the fact is it's still too close to the property line. And that's what I'm opposing.
Well, isn't one of your issues that it's gonna be potentially built on an area that you're saying is yours, you maintain, you have sprinkler heads, you have the.
That's part of my argument, yes.
Right, but that's not your land, right?
Okay.
No, I'm just asking, that's actually not your land, right?
It is not my land. I've maintained, the land has been maintained for 19 plus years by the owner of my house.
Any other questions? Member Yavlon?
The area, I'm sorry, I'm still stuck on the tandem garage. If there were to be a tandem garage, so it would be closer to the,
It would come back, I mean, this is storage all back here.
right, no, I
So-
understand that. If
so
it,
right, a
if
tandem
it
garage
came
would
out
Probably be like this.
like another 5 feet behind that, how would that impact your land?
I'm totally fine with that, I believe. I'd have to see the actual drawing, but if it came out to here, I'm fine with it.
Any other questions? Is there any, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Yes, he was. Is there anyone else here this evening who would like to be heard on this matter? Not seeing any. I will begin at my right and ask Member Beck for his thoughts.
It's an interesting case. I think I agree with Member Hendrick that, that basically comes down to that first standard about having other alternatives. And, given what Mr. Rosenthal just said, that he would be open to, or not objecting to this variance if the breezeway was shrunk a little bit. I think as the current plan is presented, I don't think I could support it because of that, not meeting that standard. All the issues about historical significance and preserving the nature of this house and the open floor plan or whatever is really moot to me because it comes down to a choice of, do you want the more modern house with the 2-car garage, or do you want to preserve the breezeway and the original architecture of the house? You're asking to have everything, and it doesn't seem like there's any compromise in the current plan.
Thank you. Member Yablon.
Member Beck, that was well said. I too am having problem with the first standard. In terms of the word only, as Member Hendricks pointed out earlier, there is a sense of, sorry, I'm having a hard time choosing my words, that to say that it's so important historically, which it's obviously a beautiful, beautiful home, and I understand proportionally with the breezeway and the look that it gives, it adds a sense of lightness to it. But there seems to be other options as well as different ways to do it that is not this plan. So if we were to vote right now, I would say no.
Thank you. Member Hendrick.
I'm going to agree with my two colleagues. I think what they've both said is pretty spot on. I think it's a difficult case. I understand both sides of the argument. I agree what Member Beck said about it being moot when you kind of are trying to have almost the best of both worlds. And then, so to me, I'm just trying to think, are there other options? It doesn't seem like, maybe there aren't, but it doesn't seem like it's been fully vetted out to me. It seems like there could be more work to be done there. And the issue is over a very small amount of space. So even if we're talking about moving it over a small amount, I have to take the neighbor at his word that that's significant to him, it's meaningful to him. So I think it needs to be explored further. I do want to comment, just for the record, since it was put in the public record, I have never driven by anyone's house, and I never do because I keep the information to what is in the public hearing. I just wanted to say that because I'm not driving around to anyone's house.
I'll second, I would not do that, and I think our attorney told us not to do that.
We have been advised by the city's attorney that we are not supposed to go do our own homework. So if we happen to drive by it because it is in our neighborhood or it's on a regular route, which it could be, I will admit I was out for a walk the other day and there was a construction going on not far from your lane, and I did walk. We may have passed, I don't know, but it was truly me just trying to get exercise and not do research.
That was me driving by.
Okay, so.
Is that a confession, Jim?
We're just putting it on the record. Thank you. Are you done, Member Henrik? Thank you. We'll go to Member Trishansky.
Yeah, this is difficult, but I will say that the plans as presented, I thought, were very meticulous. There was a good reason, I thought, as to why the breezeway was why it was remained intact, and I appreciated that explanation. I think if I were to have to vote today, I would be in favor of it. I thought everything was laid out really nicely. And it's a very unique piece of property, and I do understand why you want to go to great lengths to maintain that breezeway.
Thank you. Member Zoransky.
Thank you. First off, Ms. Dubin, I just want to just address you and just, mention that I think I appreciated the history of your family, and it was, they've certainly done significant work in the city, and it's certainly meaningful to see, and it's great that you're still, a part of the community. Yeah, kind of to echo everyone's point, this is just a really, really difficult one. I think, I've been on this board for approximately 4 years, and I think this board has done a really, really, really good job of being accommodating to all circumstances when it comes to garages, as far as getting people the type of garage that they're looking for as it compares to their lot and the situation that kind of exists. In looking at this, everything that we've been presented with, the house is too close to the property line, and I'm just not comfortable with it. I think that the breezeway could be, shored up a couple feet. I think the condensing unit could be moved for, in the grand scheme of things, almost a rounding error in what you're spending. And I think everything else could probably jive together. It seems to me like the neighbor would kind of also be happy with that if that was something you kind of came back with. And based on what's presented this evening, I unfortunately will not be able to support it, but I hope that you guys can work together, work with Carl, and come back with something that it kind of makes everybody happy, because I understand what you're trying to do. I just don't think this is the right solution.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bay.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the design. I like the plan. I'd like to see you be able to do it, especially if it resolves some of the water issues. But as it stands now, I don't think it meets the standards for reasons that have already been said. But I'm wondering how much we would be spending time debating the standards if the neighbor was in favor of it. And although that's not a determinative factor, it is a big factor. And if there was some way, maybe it involves a little bit of compromise, maybe not, that you could satisfy the neighbor, and the neighbor was here having a full-throated support for this design, I think you'd have a much better chance of getting the board to see things your way. But as it stands right now, and with the opposition, I don't think it meets the standards.
Thank you. I'm not going to try and belabor the points. I think my colleagues have stated it very well. First, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank staff. I want to thank Mrs. Dubin and her team, as well as the neighbor, for being here tonight and doing your homework and putting everything forward so eloquently. Your arguments mean a lot to us as a board, but they also mean a lot as far as what you're trying to accomplish in keeping your family legacy as a 21st century structure. And I'll be honest, the reason I asked when the trust was created was because of the standard that regards to the alleged hardship has not been created by any person presently having a proprietary interest in the subject property. Had the trust been gone back to the day the house was built, we might have had a different situation. The house has, however, been in the same family. So, it could be a rough one to argue, but I do believe you meet that standard. But just in case anyone's curious, that's why I was asking that question. I do not believe the first standard has been met with regards to, or actually the plight of the petitioner is due to the unique circumstances. I believe there are other options available that have been explored this evening that you may have explored or that could be considered in an attempt to keep the 20th century, the mid-century, 20th century vibe of the house, while also giving you the two-car garage and storage space. And because of, the water runoff issues and some of the other issues, I do believe that, there are hardships that could be determined to affect the neighbor, and therefore would be, materially detrimental. So with that, I will ask Mr. Bernstein if you would like for us to continue this matter to a later date, or would you care for us to vote this evening? To give you an opportunity to work on revisions.
Let me just talk to my client for a minute.
If we can make it very quick. We will take a 2-minute recess.
Remember, everyone, though, we're still streaming and what have you,
Yes.
so. Hot mics.
Mr. Bernstein?
Yes, and let me begin by thanking everyone for their thoughtful comments, and we listened. We're going to go back and take one more look at this before we ask the board to vote and see if there's something we can do to try to mitigate the issues that we heard tonight from the neighbor, also trying to address the comments that were made, and I'll try to do a better job addressing the first standard the next time also. So we request a continuance to the May 4th meeting.
Thank you. In that case, I will entertain a motion.
I would move to continue this matter until the May 4th meeting.
I would second it. Member
That was
Beck.
a motion by Vice Chair Bay with a second by Member Beck to continue this item until the May 4th meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Carl, can I get a roll call?
Thank you, Chair. Member Trashansky.
Aye.
Member Beck.
Aye.
Member Yablon.
Aye.
Zaransky.
Aye.
Hendrick.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bay.
Aye.
Chair Cullither.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. So just so everyone is aware, this item has been continued to the Thursday, May 4th Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. Here, 7:30 PM. There will be no new mail notice. Your notice is now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for waiting. This brings us to the second item of new business, which is application 2023-VAR-006, the property at 657 Rice Street. The applicant is Thomas Architects. Carl, we're ready when you are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So this is an application, as the chair stated, for 657 Rice Street. This is the location of the property, somewhat in the south or southeast part of the city. Yes, well, the board can see here that the subject property is irregularly shaped, and I will come back to that. So the applicants are Robin Brown and Alex Pill. Forgive me if I mispronounced the name. How do you pronounce it? Pilly. I'm sorry. So Robin Brown and Alex Pilly. Proposals for a new home. This is in the R5 zoning district. Does meet the minimum lot area requirement. It's about 20,000 square foot lot, 12,000 required. The existing home is built in 1924. That's proposed to be demolished. Relief requested is to encroach within the required rear yard. I'll walk through that here briefly. So here's the subject property. North is up. I think on this one I had to tilt a few slides, so I'll try to always remember which way is north. So north is the top or up. So this is an irregularly sited lot. I checked the survey just to make sure I had the count right. There are 9 sides to this lot, and several of them, almost all except for the one in the northwest corner, do not meet at 90 degrees. So it's, it's non-conforming in terms of shape. And that does have an impact on the lot. And then I'll also point out there's steep slope zone on the property, which, constrains the buildable area. The shading on here just represents 10% grade, so that roughly corresponds to the steep slope area. In addition to that, there's a 10-foot setback. Those two areas combined are the steep slope zone. So I always want to put my caveat that the steep slope zone indicated here in the purple shade is approximate location. I just want to point that out. Okay, so here I tilted them. So north would be to the left, would be this way. And then the street frontage is on the bottom. So it shows the existing on the left and the proposed on the right. And then the buildable area, the applicant's design professional drew the buildable area line on the plan on the right, and then I just drew the red on that. So a couple things to point out. So this is the existing home that's proposed for demolition. There are 2 additional accessory structures proposed for demo that encroach within the required rear yard, and those are proposed for demolition. And then here, there are 3 points of encroachment. Perhaps I have a better slide to zoom in on those. I'll come back to that. Okay, I do want to point something else out as well. And I noticed this more when I put the presentation together. So because of how this lot is shaped, so the way the zoning code works, you always identify the front yard first. It talks about those lot lines opposite are rear. Well, I mean, this is opposite, this is opposite, this is opposite. So those are the rear. But I want to point out that for this property to the north, this would actually be their side and their side. As where for this property, because of the irregular shape, it's actually their rear. And the reason I point that out is because when you draw the buildable area, the applicant has applied the minimum side yard requirement to the north, which makes sense because often when you have a steep slope zone area, they apply the sum or total requirement to an area where you already can't build anyway. And so that matters, the way the zoning code is written and how these property lines, which are opposite the front, become rear, because now they have the rear setback, which is 30 feet, is that right? Yeah, 30 feet, as opposed to instead being 9 feet, which is a side yard requirement. Because if these were side yards instead, I don't believe this application would need relief. This exhibit was provided by the applicant to indicate the steep slope zone. This is in my staff report. I've said this multiple times to the applicant, but I just want to point it out. The applicant is still in the process of verifying the exact location of the steep slope zone. I would consider that something for the zoning board to debate today, but if there does become an issue when they go through verification at the building permit phase, then it could, they may have to do revisions or come back. I just want to point that out. I just want that on the record. Okay, so this is kind of more of a zoom in on the site plan. The applicant's design, I didn't shade this. This is how the applicant's design professional shaded it, so it's easy to see. So there are basically 3 points of encroachment. So the maximum depth is 15 feet here, but these other ones are less, 4.5 feet and then 3 feet. But the total area of encroachment is 240 square feet, which I do believe is less than the existing encroachment in the rear yard with those accessory buildings that were on the back side. Otherwise, the proposal meets the established building setback, it meets the front yard, it meets the side yards, and to be verified, also meets the steep slope zone. The applicant submitted elevation plans indicating that they meet the height requirement. Of course, again, the applicant will have to verify that with the grade exhibit when they go in for building permit. I just want to point out the FAR. I noticed that the allowance is up to 5,800 some square feet. However, the applicant's only proposing 4,200 square feet. Forestry, no objections. All matters of tree preservation will be addressed during permitting. Engineering division, yes, they did have comments, but those comments were directed to the applicant and their team. And again, just get back to verifying the steep slope zone location. Public comment, none were submitted. Planner 2, Zubin Coleman, who I'm not sure has ever been to a zoning board of appeals meeting. We are cross-training. We want Zubin Coleman to do several reports and then eventually come to a meeting. He chose just to do the report for this one and not come to this meeting. But his name was the one listed on the notice, and I did ask him. I said, did anybody call you? Did anybody email you? I think he'd indicated he'd received 1 or maybe 2 phone calls. And he told them the same thing we always tell everyone. The meeting is this date. You should come and provide testimony if you want. Oh yeah, nothing was submitted post-packet posting for this. It's kind of a note I just keep so I don't forget if anything was. So yeah, so that's the presentation. The relief are for those 3 triangular elements of encroachment for a total of 240 square feet of encroachment. Take questions if there are any. Thank you.
Member Hendrick.
Can you explain the side yard or the rear yard? If it was a side yard, we wouldn't be here again?
No, I don't think so because.
You don't think you'll explain it?
Yeah, because so the maximum encroachment is 15 feet, which means the proposed setback is 15 feet. Well, the proposed setback of 15 feet would meet a minimum side yard setback of 9 feet.
So I agree. I didn't, so the part I guess you spoke about before the math, though, about why are we not treating it as a side yard? Again, because we did the front yard first and the shape is weird?
Yeah, because those lot lines are opposite the front.
Okay.
So they become a rear.
Okay, thank you.
We don't, I mean,
And-
oh, go ahead. My apologies.
Did you? Okay. No, I thought you were just putting your phone down, I guess. You mentioned on 2 points, I think, the potential they'd be back before us. One is regarding the height. If the measurement of the height, once they do that, exceeds the maximum, because there's a slope, we've had this in the past, if I remember correctly. Not on this one, but in other cases. And was there another reason why you?
Well, the steep slope zone I pointed
Yeah.
out. Again, and
Okay.
those are not meant to, I mean, if the board has questions, I'm happy to answer them, but they're not meant to,
No, I was just trying to
Right.
get the whole picture
Yeah.
that, the potential that we could be back here.
yeah. It's not meant to, I mean, again, I always try to be careful, because on the one hand, I don't want to derail the conversation. What matters is what the applicant submitted, but on the other hand, I like things on the record.
Well, I agree. It's just that when you showed the elevation, there were peaks, so.
Yeah, and I actually can't recall, and, perhaps the applicant's design professional can address it. They may have perhaps already done a grade exhibit. I don't, I
Okay.
apologize, I don't
That's fine.
immediately recall. But I just like to point these things out, so that it's on the record.
Remember you have one?
So, sorry, is our concern that the buildable area is going to be changed because of steep slope zone requirements?
Well, right, potentially. So the engineering division provided comments on the first set of information the applicant submitted and stated that it needed to be revised to, our engineering division did not agree with how it had been drawn, and so the applicant was in the process of revising that. And my understanding is it won't be an issue, but I just have to point out that on the record that if it does become an issue, then they'd either have to make revisions or come back to the zoning board of appeals. But as submitted right now, as stipulated before the board, it does not need that.
Right. It's
If
not-
we breach
Neither
that.
of those issues are before us, right?
Yeah, none of those issues are before you, but no, I put it on the record just so that you know, we're always checking these things, and if it does become an issue, it'll darn well get addressed.
That I had no doubt.
Yes. Any other questions for Carl?
Sorry, one more.
Go right ahead.
Sorry, just because I've never seen this on a drawing before, what are like the little rectangles to the right?
Yeah, no, so, that's. I mean, first of all, that's absolutely excellent that you recognize that, because I recognize that too. And actually, when I was going over this with the new planner too, or he's not new, but he was new to doing the stuff, he was doing the site plan review, and I pointed that out to him, he's like, oh, I didn't even notice that, you're right, what are those? I asked the applicant, and perhaps if we want, just want to put on the record, I think it's just a misprint. I think it's not supposed to be there. I think it's just a technical issue with how the PDF displayed itself. Because I actually asked the applicant, are those solar panels, or those beach?
They were little cell phones or something.
Where were we looking? I can't even-
No, but it probably does make sense to ask the applicant, just to state on record,
Towards the right.
that those are a misprint. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I noticed those too.
Symbols on Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hieroglyphics.
I think it's one of those.
We'll let
one of
the
those
applicant
script
address it
issues.
since it was
Yeah.
there.
I did talk with the applicant, or their design professional, but again, I already forgot, because we talked about this several weeks ago. I think it's like a script issue with like the PDF, how it reads it, but anyway. Yeah, excellent question. Yeah, I thought it was maybe solar panels.
I was thinking cabanas.
Well, yeah, or yeah, seats for a beach or a pool. Yeah.
I don't see those. No, I'm kidding.
Any other questions?
It's their life-size mahjong game.
Thank you, Carl. I'll ask the applicant if they would like to step up. Good evening. If you'll provide your name and address for the record.
Yeah, I'm Peter Hensler from 1403 North Vale in Arlington Heights.
Thank you. Do you hereby affirm or attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm the design professional, not the applicant.
Right.
I'll start out with addressing the boxes on the plan and enjoying everybody's guesses at what they are, but Carl's correct, excuse me. That's just the text from the surveyor got transcribed strangely before we submitted this. So I think that says something about the lot number in reality. So nothing's planned for where those boxes are.
In the old days, we would have taken white out.
I think I did revise this, but oh well. Yeah, Carl also touched on a unique character of this lot that may not jump out just from the unique geometry of it, which is the rear lot lines to the northeast that are side lot lines for the neighboring property. So to the board's comment about if that were deemed a side lot line a few months back, we would not be here and there would be no relief sought. Interestingly, it's not relevant particularly to the request that we have, but you may wonder why these side lot lines here are side lot lines for us, and it's because they're not opposite, and the end of the block is actually, our property is actually the end of the block because the steep slope zone intersects the front lot line. So just another unique sort of quirk of this. The note on the steep slope zone, if you could maybe go to the next slide. Our surveyor and civil engineer are working with the engineer at the city, Manny Gomez, to work through how best to actually demolish the existing house, which is, of course, not the relief being sought here, but the existing home sits within the steep slope zone. And our proposal of the design is actually to pull the new home away from the steep slope zone. And in order to do that, we do need these 3 encroachments. Next one, maybe. Yeah. So perhaps you guys have the floor plan for the home in your packet. But the largest encroachment here is for the kitchen living area. So the focus of the design, and both in its site strategy and its architecture, is for this young couple who's moving to Highland Park to maximize the benefits of the property, which are the 2 ravines cutting through it and the nice privacy provided by the trees within that ravine and to the front of the property. And the house is arranged in such a way to provide a backyard to the northeast, which could be argued it could be a side yard as well. Yeah, where it says play yard, because where you see in the top of this, anything green on these diagrams is noted as a steep slope zone or top of ravine setback. So the intention is to have enough tableland left over for play yard for future kids, which I have actually coincidentally just found out about 20 minutes before this started that they are expecting a child. That's very exciting.
I hope the respective grandparents have been notified before being zoomed in.
This is being broadcast to the world.
Not the public record. Are you serious? No. Okay.
At least your husband knows.
Well, I hope you're not watching now. Yeah, so I just want to stress, and you guys can ask questions to me in a second, but that I feel very strongly that the Zoning Board of Appeals is here for as an entity for these types of properties. We're asking for relief based on the natural features of the property that make it extremely restrictive to build a home that's of reasonable size and shape that can improve the quality of the lot. The existing home that is on the lot is in very poor shape, not to mention that it's sitting within the ravine itself. So the intention is to improve everything, leave it better than the way we found it, and in order to do so, that relief is sought. So open to any questions you may have. I know it's a strangely shaped property.
We have the standards. Would you like to just?
Sure.
Do you have them in
Run
front of
through
you? Would you like to walk through them?
Yeah.
Just so that.
Sure. cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to use only under the conditions allowed. Yeah. Can we go to a drawing diagram?
Sure, which one would you like?
Maybe the one showing the, yeah, right there. So you can see how the shape of the buildable area highlighted here by the red and green lines is a unique shape. And not only is it a unique shape, but pretty tight dimensions in the areas that are buildable. The northern side lot line is, side yard setback line is only 13 feet in depth. So in order to put a garage in that area, which is where the existing driveway comes in, limiting the garage even to an 18-foot depth, which is shallower than the previous design professional said should be the minimum garage depth of 20 feet. An 18-foot depth garage, which is what's drawn here, allows for a car to be parked. And even still, we need, I think it's 4.5 feet of encroachment into there. So just that gives an illustration of the difficulty of puzzle piecing a house built of right angles onto a buildable area like this. Plight of the petitioner due to unique circumstances. I think that's illustrated decently well by the rear lot line setback that is otherwise a side yard for the neighboring property. There's also, which Carl pointed out, 2 existing accessory structures that sit within this rear yard. Could we go to the survey maybe? Or that next one? Yeah.
Yeah, you can, yes, you can.
Yeah, these 2 accessory structures. There's a line drawn on this diagram highlighting the 3-foot rear yard accessory structure setback. We're not proposing a detached accessory structure such as a detached garage in this rear yard because that would, 1, render the rear yard unusable as a tableland play area, and 2, would render it inaccessible by a car or 2. The particular physical surroundings, shape, topographical condition of subject property would result in a hardship. That goes to the steep slope zone that encroaches on, do you mind if I?
Of course.
That forces this sort of arrowhead shape, further cutting back what is buildable on the property. This is something I want to mention on here, which is the FAR that Carl brought up. The maximum allowable FAR is considerable, and the request that we have is considerably lower than that. That's not just out of the kindness of the homeowners' hearts, but it's also that's really all that can fit on the buildable area with the encroachments that we have. The alleged hardship has not been created by any person presently having proprietary interest in the subject property. The rear lot line determination and the steep slope zone were certainly not created by us or anybody else that we're aware of. Proposed variation will not materially be detrimental to the public welfare. I think rather than that, we're trying to improve the quality of the ravine or the health and stability of it by removing the structure that currently sits within it. I'll get to maybe number 6 here at the same time, which is adequate supply of light and air to adjacent properties. We're not doing anything restrictive to the property to the south. We're proposing a building further away from it. The neighbor to the north, we are proposing a house closer to their home, but we're proposing to demolish the existing accessory structures, which are very close to their side lot line. So they will have ample light and air movement through the rear of their house or their yard. But of course, you can see in the drawings, our house is proposed to be closer, but we're not proposing an encroachment to the north. Will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. It certainly won't. We're maintaining the maximum height allowable, and the existing home is in pretty poor shape. I know you all drove by it before this meeting. So you saw.
Darn window.
And, yeah, so we're not designing any home that's really out there in any sort of way. It's simple gable structure. The framing of it is very straightforward. Trying to open up a decent amount of windows to the two ravines that they have so they can enjoy that. Proposed variation is in harmony with the spirit and intent of the zoning code. It is, I believe, in harmony with the spirit of it. Of course, we are requesting a breaking of the letter of the zoning code with these encroachments, but I believe strongly that they're not egregious asks, and they're brought about by the difficult conditions that the site has.
Thank you. Any member Yablon?
Sorry, I'm question girl today. Just because I feel a little cockeyed. For the I think the garage entrance is closer to the steep slope zone. Is that correct? Am I reading that? That you would have like a road or a driveway going, no, if we look at that map, like that the garage is, where does the garage live?
Maybe you can pull up that floor plan. That may be rearranged then. Yeah, so the garage is actually to the north of the property.
Oh, wait, so the garage faces the front lot line, not the side lot line?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
This is rotated, so north is to our left here. Sorry, it gets a little confusing with the rotating.
Okay.
This thing doesn't have, this computer doesn't have the same PDF level that I have on mine, or I could rotate it easy. Oh, there, is that it right there? Oh, there. Oh, no, see, this computer doesn't have the upgraded.
For $29.95.
Upgraded PDF.
Council member, can we please ask the city manager to get this computer upgraded?
Got it.
Okay.
So there's no concern of them
So this is
falling into
actually
this?
the garage.
Okay, got it.
The driveway you see here, all this underlay here, that's the existing.
Okay.
So I just want to note that, I'm not speaking to the mic, sorry, that the gravel driveway noted here is not planned to be gravel, but we intend to keep the general footprint of it. And we're not proposing a new curb cut, certainly not on the south of the front lot line.
Got it, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't sure
Yeah.
where it was, and if you were like trying to drive in a steep slope. Okay, perfect.
Any other questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Would the owners like to say anything or not? It's. If you'll please provide your name and address for the record.
Okay. Robin Brown, 225 West Huron, apartment 520, Chicago, Illinois.
Thank you. Do you hereby affirm or attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Floor is yours.
I just wanted to thank everyone for their time. It's a late evening, so thanks for hearing our case out. I did graduate from Highland Park High School in 2007, and I convinced my husband, who grew up in Peoria, Illinois, that this was the best suburb to raise your kids in, good public education. So we're moving back, and we're very proud of it. My parents live in the town of Port Sheridan, so we will have childcare. We are telling them this weekend or next weekend. But yeah, so thank you so much for hearing our case.
Thank you.
Apologize for making you go second. It would have been a lot faster to make you go.
Oh, no, it's
I'm
okay.
gonna go first.
Do we have any questions? Have you spoken to the neighbors?
Unfortunately, we haven't had the chance to see them
Okay.
on the weekends, but we
And
did send
did
out
any of them
letters.
reach out following the notice?
No.
No?
reach out.
Okay. If you'll come up to the mic.
I spoke to the two neighbors to the north. I went out to the property to do some site measuring myself, including taking measurements of their front facade to the street. So this was before I had the established front yard setback and needed to get some design work underway. So obviously I rang the doorbell and let them know why I was there. And they were both very interested in what was going on and both made comments about oh, what's going on over there? I'm not sure the previous owner of the property or the status of it, but it's could use some TLC. So perhaps they seemed excited about that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And there's nobody else here, but I will have asked. And I will begin down at this end with Member Trushansky.
All right, well, I'm really glad that this followed, that this case followed the other one. This is pretty easy. Obviously, the variance that you're asking is solely due to the configuration and the topography of the property itself. So I would be in favor. I think it meets everything.
Thank you. Member Zuransky.
Yeah, thanks for staying late. I think it's a great project. I think it meets all the standards, and I support it.
Thank you. Member Beck.
I support it.
Member Yablon.
I concur with what my colleague said earlier, and I would support it.
Thank you. Member Hendrick.
Thank you guys for staying. It was a long night, all three of you. And congratulations. It's a great place to raise a family. I'm not from here, and I've been raising my family here, and it's great. I'm in support as well. I believe all the standards have been met. I agree with the quote of reasonable size and shape type of house for the property, and because of the topography and everything like that, I believe the standards have been met, so I'm in favor.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bay.
Welcome to Highland Park. Welcome back to Highland Park, as the case may be. I'm biased, but I think the Ravinia Braeside area is a terrific area to live, so I live there. Yeah, I think the standards have been met, and it's going to be a great project, and look forward to it. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I will concur with my colleagues. I want to thank you and your architect for a great presentation. It was really informative, and staff, as usual, did a great job. I'm going to ask our student member if he has any comments.
Nothing to say, just, yeah, I mean, it seems like a great life that you guys are going to build here, and I'm happy to support you guys.
Thank you. And so with that, I will entertain a motion.
Member Hedrick would make a motion to adopt the order as presented in the packet.
Member Yablon seconds.
Thank you. So that was a motion by Member Hendrick with a second by Member Yablon to adopt the variance order as drafted. Carl, when you have a chance, we'll do a roll call vote.
Thank you. Member Trushansky.
Yes.
Member Beck.
Aye.
Yablon.
Aye.
Zuransky.
Aye.
Hendrick.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bay.
Aye.
Chair Collifer.
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0. The order is adopted.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Double congratulations.
Double congratulations. Carl will be following up with you probably Tuesday?
Tuesday.
I think you're handing the order out right now.
Well, I'm signing it now.
Oh, who has to do that?
Then it goes to Carl and it gets filed with the county. That brings us to a staff report. Carl, do we have anything this evening?
Well, just two items real quick. So one, the legal training, you had asked for that earlier, Chair, and that is on the schedule, and I checked. That's for May 18th. So everyone try to circle that, especially if you're a newer member. Well, all of you. Try to circle May 18th for the legal training. And then I just wanted to follow up. And the chair, I've already followed up with the chair, or at least I'm in the process of following up. But there were comments at the last meeting about zoning text amendment. And I did raise that to the director's attention, and we do want to discuss that with the chair, and then from there proceed. So yeah, so I just didn't want anyone to think that I ignored it, not put it on there, but we just want to discuss that first, then move forward. And I did just want to point out too, though, just so everyone is aware, things are taking a little bit longer. We're going through a major implementation project. We're doing a brand-new software for the city. It's not just permitting, that'll just how it touches me. It'll be for the whole city, a whole new software from, I think it's called Tyler Intergov. And it's, I mean, like last week, for instance, there were like 3 full days that I had to commit to that. So, but we do intend to speak with the chair on that and then follow up from there. So I just wanted to point that out, so not forgotten.
We've waited this long, we'll wait longer.
We are, I wanted to point it out. That's
And just to follow up, and you can note in case I forget to email you, I will not be here on May 18th. I will either be in Dublin or Cork, so do not count on me calling in or zooming in for the legal training.
Is there business that meeting too, Carl, that you know of, or?
For May 18th?
Yeah.
There will likely be one actually, the window for that is closed, so there will only be one application and then anything that gets continued.
Okay. How about for the 4th?
The 4th?
Yeah.
We're just gonna have the one that got continued, which, from this evening, the 239 Park Avenue.
It's a good thing that one's simple, so.
Good thing what?
Oh, I should also point out too, and this I almost forgot, there was an application that was continued to today from the last March one for a Heritage Tree, but they withdrew their application. So those just, when they withdraw, they quote unquote, well, they disappear from the agenda anyway.
Pool guy, yeah.
Swimming pool.
Yeah, right, I almost forgot, I should follow up on those things, yeah, because that was technically continued, but once it was withdrawn, just, it's done. So they withdrew in writing, that one's done.
Great.
For the legal training, does that mean we have to be here at 6:30, or what? What
No,
does that mean?
no, we would plan to still have the regular meeting at 7:30. Like I said, there will be one new item. Never know how long that'll go, obviously, and then there's a legal training, which I think they try to go towards 1 hour, but you know, if there's more questions, they can go later.
The city can't afford the overtime.
Could we opt for a 6:30 start that day? Is that better for everybody? I mean, I don't want to speak out of term, but.
Those who come from downtown will.
I'll be in Florida, you guys can do whatever you want.
And there's a hard stop.
2 of us will be gone. Will there be a
We will be
quorum?
continuing the legal training until the next
Well,
meeting.
you got to know if there's a quorum between now and then. Not my concern. Council member, you've been waiting so politely.
2 things. One, I know it's hard to predict, exactly which items might take longer or be shorter, but given the vast experience you have, like in this case today, could there have been a way to kind of eyeball this and say, wow, I think this one is a lot simpler, this one looks more complicated, because to have them wait for 2 hours and then for something that just took 10 minutes, I wonder if there's just, you can't do it every time, but this was so extreme. I
If
wonder
there's
you could-
opposition, maybe. I mean, if there's neighbor opposition, there's letters in the package.
Right, like there's some,
Or if there are attorneys involved, Kel's here, it's going to take longer.
absolutely,
Yeah,
and that's a legitimate criteria, right?
But can you imagine how angry they
I
would have
wasn't going to put
been?
that on the record.
I'll put it on
I
there.
mean, they were good-natured.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
which is fine.
And
but-
thankfully, they got what they wanted, so.
And they got,
that's-
but still, I mean, if you still think, it was still 2 hours.
There was.
They were also probably mortified for the 2 hours that they were here.
Yeah, so, and the next couple may not be as understanding, and it would be still on us to say, well, can we be a little bit more considerate, thinking through how this might play out? And again, I'm not saying we can call it every time, because sometimes there's unpredictable complications, but this kind of situation just makes me think that maybe we can read that a little bit.
Well, we also
I agree.
talked at
That's why
one
I
point
followed
about
up.
time limits on presentation.
Yeah, we've talked about that, or curfews, but that's going to be harder.
Yeah, but
I mean, we asked a lot of questions, so I think
Yeah.
that's on us.
And then the questions broke up the presentation, and
Right.
I think it's a good point, though. I do think, you can't always tell, but I think you could tell this time.
Take your best guess.
Yeah,
As far
take
as-
best guess, and then,
Yeah.
you may be wrong, but that's okay, but if we even attempt, I think we'll get it right 90% of the time.
One
We've
issue is
even
like
in
the
the past-
continuance would usually be first.
Because now that will be old business, so Cal will be the first thing on.
Well, that's fair enough,
Right,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
But-
Right.
But
You're
there's
just saying
been
all things being
instances
equal.
Right, no, I get it.
where we've said, oh, to one of the applicants, do you mind if you go second?
Yeah, we
Because we
have.
think this
We
one's
have.
going to be simpler.
The current, well, it's not a written policy, it's unwritten, but the current policy is we just take applications in the order they come in. And so whoever submits first gets to go first. The only exception we make is when the school or park district is on an agenda. Often we ask that to be taken out of order because They're paying consultants with taxpayer money, and we try to get them out as soon as possible.
That's fair. Yeah, no, I get it. So, and then my second.
But we will also remember to ask Cal not to repeat himself at the next meeting.
There you go. Yeah, and my second question is, you know, I see the packet and I see there's some pictures that don't necessarily get displayed here, but even if they had displayed some of the pictures up here, there's a narrative, right, like about the breezeway and the condenser and the 2 feet to 3 feet, and it's in the way. Is there a way to coach these petitioners to just use pictures more often? Because this verbal description, number one, is very hard for everybody to follow. Number two, well, it's up for interpretation. You know, is it tight? Is it wide? Is it crowded? Is it not? And if there's a picture, that's, you know, that's worth 1,000 words. I wonder if we can just coach them to just use pictures more often.
I certainly recommend they provide pictures. It's actually included in the packet, or in the checklist. It's not listed as a requirement, but it is listed in the checklist that they can submit photos. But I can certainly bring that to their attention that, you know, photos are really appreciated.
Yeah, and I think it's good for them and it's good for the group, right? Because I think it's just going to speed up things, because there was just a lot of verbal explanation that if they're showing a picture, we go, okay, there it is, you know?
And especially since we're not supposed to drive by.
Yeah. So, all right, and then my.
Thing, we're really
Yeah.
not supposed to drive by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How come?
Hard.
Because we're only supposed to base our decision on the evidence that is presented in case it were to get appealed. So you driving by intentionally to look at the property gives you more information than the neighbor has they've presented or the neighbor has
I
presented.
remember that conversation, but I thought it was more in the context of like, don't get out of your car and like walk around the.
No, it was, he said do not drive by.
Yeah, I think it's just, it's a recommendation. It's not.
Right, it's a
not
recommendation,
prohibition.
yeah, and if it's on your path, you know, there was a woman who lives 6 doors down from me approximately, you know, I'm go out for a walk, I can't. And every time I turn left out of my driveway, I look at her house. You know, she still has her architect sign in her yard 5 years later, it ticks me off.
It's definitely not a strict, I mean, because you and I have talked in previous cases too, where, like the Ridge Road, where we've been like, you know, that's a windy road or something, I don't know what we said, and I think you just kind of disclosed to the rest of
You
the
mean
board.
the
what
one
you
with
know.
the silo?
No, that's the cool project though.
Yeah, it is. They just forgot that there was a silo.
Hey, and Kevin, do you
was a-
think that
I think it was a
that's
fence.
unique to the
Yes,
ZBA?
it was a
Because
fence.
at city council, we drive every time.
It's a legal thing from the city's attorney.
But specifically for this.
I thought
Yes.
you just don't get out of your car and walk around like the private property.
Yeah, because we walk around.
But you can, your opinions are more policy-driven, and they can't get appealed to the circuit court.
That's true.
Ours get appealed directly to the circuit court, so the appeal is based on the evidence that's been presented.
Yeah.
And if we go do field trips,
Oh, yeah. I got it, okay.
so that's the rationale.
true.
It's that we're more judicial than city council.
Yeah, the city council is a legislative body, and this is
Right.
a quasi-judicial body.
Has
Right.
there been an appeal that's gone to the court, like in the
Yeah,
last
there've
10
been,
years?
there've been 2.
Oh, really?
There was one whether or not a patio is a hockey rink or vice versa. And there was somebody who is on Lake, it's either Lake Cook or Clavey near the highway, who claimed discrimination. Based on- What?
Discrimination.
He claimed race discrimination. Neither of them are within my term.
They both
They were in, they were,
They both predated me as well.
Yeah,
I know
they-
the hockey rink one, the other one I wasn't aware of.
yeah, those are the two that, yes.
And then the other one is real logistical. I'll be out of the country for the May 4th one. So, and Ida knows, and you know, Carl, and
All right, how do you-
understand it.
I'll give you a response to that email as well.
Great. Anything else? In that case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Don't all hurry.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And a second?
Member Beck will second.
So a motion to adjourn by Vice Chair Bay with a second by Member Beck to adjourn the meeting at 10:13 PM. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the meeting is hereby adjourned.